Pokémon Gale of Darkness and its predecessor are among my favorite spin-off games in the franchise. They take a whole new spin on the Pokémon formula with a gritty story mode, where the objective is to essentially steal Pokémon from the general public. But not just any Pokémon, a whole new variant with the doors to their hearts artificially closed off, turning them into fighting machines, dubbed Shadow Pokémon. And it's up to us, the valiant protagonists, to help these Pokémon regain their trust in humans once again, and slowly rehabilitate them back to their original, innocent, untampered natures. But I'm a hardcore Nuzlocke, goddammit. If the enemy is handing me Pokémon that are supposedly fighting machines on a silver platter, why in my right mind would I waste the time and effort teaching them the meaning of friendship when they're already mindless battle drones willing to risk their lives for me? Let's see how my Pokémon perform if they are actually affected by the way I treat them. Just to clarify, this is not a Nuzlocke for a multitude of reasons, one of which is that this run pretty much doubles as a no XP challenge, and while the level curve isn't nearly as bad as Colosseum, the average levels of the Pokemon we catch are quite lower, while the trainer levels ramp up pretty quickly. You'll see what I mean. But I'll be abiding by some rules, such as I'll be playing on Switch mode and I can't use items in battle. You may have already seen that little bar at the bottom, but this video ended up being insanely long. I have no clue how I managed to do that, but to make it easier, I've included timestamps so that you can watch it in more bite-sized chunks like a regular video, or just skip around to specific parts. And of course I would appreciate you watching the entire thing so I can get some of that sweet watch time, but whatever's easier for you. Like the previous game, we start with a cinematic. This time a swarm of helicopters circle a cruiser, and a strange looking Lugia lifts it out the water into the night. It's not as flashy as our protagonist literally blowing up an enemy base, but what happened to those sailors? I don't think those helicopters are coming back for them, and I can't imagine the Sharpedo infested waters being too friendly to non-water type humans. Do we see our first on-screen death in Pokemon? The mainline series really needs to step up their stakes. Unfortunately, our protagonist this time is a step down in every way from our last one. Not only does he not blow up his sworn enemies, but he doesn't even have a cool bike. I remember being really disappointed as a kid when I realized that we weren't playing as Wes in this game. Like I mentioned before, one of the bigger changes from Pokémon Colosseum that we see right off the bat is that the level curve begins at far lower levels. Last time we began the game with a level 26 Umbreon and a level 25 Espeon, the first Pokémon that we were able to catch being level 30, with the trainers having Pokémon at around similar levels. This time we start with level 10 Eevee. Oh no, Eevee, what did they do to you? This is also reflected in the enemy trainers using Pokemon as low as level 6. God, I love Chubbin. This is peak comedy. Like Colosseum, however, we're immediately thrown into the main story as Cypher storms our research headquarters and kidnaps the professor. Luckily, we happened to pick up the snag machine right before this took place, so we can steal the enemy's level 11 Shadow Teddiursa, and the professor can live out his new life knowing that his sacrifice wasn't in vain. Well, everyone moves on pretty quickly, and there's still a job to do, so we head to the next new location in the game, Gaetian Port, to grab a fetch quest item. Not even 5 minutes dragging Jovi around, and she gets us into a street fight. Worst case scenario, we can use her as a weapon. Is happening a word people have ever used to describe themselves unironically? I can't even think of a time that someone's used it ironically. Isn't it used to describe a place like a club or a restaurant? Granted, I was a child when this game came out, so I don't know what the hip lingo was at the time. Or is this just something that the boomers thought kids sounded like? I was fixated on this one phrase for an unreasonable amount of time. Unfortunately, it'll be another day before Jovi finds a calling as a baseball bat, since this very kind old man, who surely won't be used for the exact same twist as the last game, uses his child as a meat shield instead. Kinda sad, since I really would have appreciated having his Shadow Zangoose this early on. Why did they zoom in on his face like that? While Zangoose is currently out of our reach, with us regaining our freedom, we can explore Gaetian, and since I'm a good big brother, start some fights with the locals. How do people living in these houses actually go anywhere? Do they just have to hope that someone's happening to pass by when they need their groceries? What if they have a heart attack at 2 AM? I say as if I would ever actually leave my house even during a medical emergency. But how is this any more efficient than just having 2 extra bridges protruding out of the central pillars? For some reason, people around here carry Shadow Pokemon, and my totally legit organization gave me a free pass to commit crimes. Is this ladybug even worth the judgmental looks I'll get? The biggest difference in Gale of Darkness is the changes that were made to Shadow Pokemon. My main criticism of Colosseum was that the Shadow Pokemon were just kind of underwhelming despite the image built for them. The only real difference is that they all learned the same move. Shadow Rush, a physical move with a base power of 90 which also deals out recall damage. That's it. There literally is no benefit to using them over regular Pokemon. It makes sense mechanically as they probably don't want you to do what I'm doing, but yeah, it doesn't really fit the theme I think they were going for. Most of which stays the same in Gale of Darkness, but with a few new buffs making them actually useful to use, as well as turning them into real threats at times. The main difference being that Shadow moves now all deal super effective damage to all non-Shadow Pokemon, and not very effective damage to Shadow ones. And that's right, Shadow moves. Now instead of just Shadow Rush, there's a whole bunch of new Shadow moves added to the game. Physical moves, moves that have special effects, and even options for special attackers. Since this is still Gen 3 where the physical special split doesn't exist yet, there isn't really any UI changes that explain this. But the rule of thumb is that if a move hits a single Pokemon, it's physical, and if a move hits multiple targets, it's special. There are a few exceptions, but these are reserved as signature moves for some important encounters later. So that makes the game easier, right? Shadow Pokemon finally have something that gives them the upper hand over their non-traumatized counterparts. Well, yes. And no. On paper, this is certainly an improvement over Colosseum, but something that I learned literally during my last video, almost 2 decades since I first played that game, is that when they're in hyper mode, Shadow Rush has a 95% chance to get a crit on the opponent, and in this generation, crits do double the damage, which is basically like using a super effective move anyway. So while in this game, Shadow moves officially deal super effective damage, since the average Shadow moves have a much lower base power, only 2 surpassing 90, I think there's a fair argument to say that they're actually worse in this game. Literally the only move Teddiursa has, Shadow Blitz, has a base power of 40, a little over the move Tackle, and this is a move we'll be seeing a lot during the first 60% of this game. Well, worse for physical attackers at least. Special attackers are happy that they get something. Of course, Shadow moves that are super effective and get a crit do more damage, but to my knowledge, there are no similar mechanics in Gale of Darkness that increase the crit chance. In fact, on the topic of hyper mode, XD's variant is called reverse mode, which functions very differently. You still can't use items on Pokemon in reverse mode, which isn't too important to us, but now there's no restrictions for us using regular moves. Pokemon obey you regardless. The only downside is at the end of each turn, Pokemon in reverse mode take some damage, kinda like they hit themselves in confusion. It's not that big of a deal, but unlike hyper mode, there's no reason to keep your Pokemon in reverse mode, and it's better to snap them out as soon as possible. But that's just one part to it. The other change to Shadow Pokemon is when they're up as your enemy. As you might have seen with Ladybug and Poochyena, next to the levels there's a plus sign. I didn't know what this meant for the longest time, but after some research, what this indicates is that whenever a Shadow Pokemon is sent out, they have a random number between 0 and 3 added to their levels, with their stats reflecting the result instead. There's no real way to know this, and even the game doesn't really say anything about this mechanic from what I remember, so I wonder if they really thought that the plus sign was a concise way of explaining that. This is only applied for the opponent. When you catch them, it reverts them back to their displayed level. But one thing working in our favor is that the enemies can only use their Shadow Pokemon's Shadow moves. Moves, which I mentioned earlier, are not very effective against other Shadow Pokemon, i.e. the only Pokemon we'll be using. Which makes more sense narratively, as the way Shadow Pokemon unlock more moves is as they become friendlier, so it didn't really make sense that the enemy team could use their Pokemon's full moveset. In a regular run, this would actually make opponents tougher, as we'll likely be using purified Pokemon, so the opponents will always get a super effective attack off, even if they have the random move AI. But now, Shadow Pokemon are essentially a free catch for us, provided that they don't use too many support moves for their non-Shadow partners. Wow, talking about Shadow Pokemon this time took almost 2 pages out of my script, a vast expansion from the list of bullet points I gave during my last video. But yeah, I should probably get on with the game, huh? With 2 new Shadow Pokemon added, Eevee no longer has to show off their controversial trim. Well, before we can move on, we're forced to return to a gate village for the exact same pointless side quest as the last game. Once again, we fight through a gaggle of trainers, now using level 8 Pokemon as a way to test me. Test me for what, you might ask? For the benefit of using their fancy stone obelisk to purify my precious Shadow Pokemon. How dare they insinuate that my Shadow Pokemon aren't perfect the way they are? Well, unfortunately, Egan doesn't let me progress the story until I entertain the idea that he's being helpful. So we're forced to give up a Shadow Pokemon before even having a full team. I guess Ladybug finally has a chance to shine. This is possibly the most the Ledian line has ever done to help me beat a Pokemon game. Ironic that it involves me getting rid of her. While I was perfectly happy recognizing the heroic sacrifices of the professor, apparently no, he has to be rescued. Well, there'll be more Shadow Pokemon and we just lost a valuable member of the team, so who am I to complain? We make a return to a familiar place, the Shadow Pokémon Lab, except this time it will be the first dungeon that we have to traverse through in the game. Upon arriving, we immediately get bombarded by 6 Cypher Grunts wearing uniforms of different colors, each corresponding with the type of their Shadow Pokemon. Egan did at least do something useful, allowing us to buy Pokeballs in a gate, an item that was apparently contraband in this region, but I swear we already unlocked them in the last game. Also, if a non-profit research facility working to eradicate Shadow Pokemon, which presumably has multiple grants allowing them to fund said research, is sending me on a quest to enact their mission, Why am I paying for my own Pokeballs? Why didn't they prepare enough Pokeballs in the first place? Surely they had to test the snag machine out somehow. I don't think this guy needs to be rescued. He needs an investigation for embezzlement. Well, with the Pokeballs that we've stocked up on, we can add 6 more Pokemon to the team. This includes Houndour, Mareep, Spheal, Gulpin, Seedot, and Baltoy. Not the greatest lineup. But these Pokemon are probably the best we'll have for a while. The ones that we catch in the lab are actually of a lower level and are sometimes just worse. For some reason, I thought if I left this area, these grunts would despawn, so I tried getting all these mons in one go, which actually ended up being pretty difficult with no revives and limited healing items. I have no clue why I thought that, as when I went to restock on balls before heading into the lab, yup, still there. The Pokemon that we catch in the lab are... they sure are. We get the pleasure of catching Pokemon like Spinarak, Carvana, Numel. Everyone likes Numel. Trust me, no one else is more upset than I am that I can't evolve Shroomish into my fungi kangaroo boy. The most I took away from this trip was how weird some of the Kanto Pokemon looked on the GameCube. We already saw what they did to Eevee, but why does Machop look like that? And they gave my poor Abra game a neck. I'm onto you. It's not long until we have our first admin fight of the game. Lavrina isn't nearly as intimidating as Dakeem, her team is far weaker, doesn't use any interesting gimmicks, and she doesn't even look like she could crush me in between her fingertips. I mean, she leads with Beautifly and Luvdisc. What were they thinking? I mean, the levels are starting to get up there though. Most grunts we fought up until now were like 2 or 3 levels under our own mons, and now hers are around level 20. While our shadow moves are super effective, we don't get stab on them, so typically it's still worth using stab moves when they are super effective. While special attackers like Spheal finally do get special shadow moves, like I mentioned, they are for the most part spread damage moves, meaning their already low base power is lowered by 25% when there are 2 targets on the field. Houndour was able to survive the first barrage of attacks, but I want to keep him alive a little longer, so into Mareep on the water gun. Unfortunately, Beautifly doubles into her, doing a collective of exactly half. While Mareep was also in reverse mode before the battle, so she even takes some recall damage, meaning she won't be able to survive another onslaught. Shadow Wave wasn't even enough to get the kill. Both Luvdisc and Beautifly outspeed, and both indeed target Mareep. Down she goes. Good time to remind you guys, this is not a Nuzlocke. Now I bring out Gulpin as Spheal Shadow Wave brings Luvdisc below half, and finishes Beautifly off, bringing out Roselia. Luvdisc now resorts to using a weak tackle, and Roselia's Mega Drain doubles into Spheal for the kill. I bring Houndour back out, and Gulpin uses a Sludge, bringing Luvdisc low, and then gets the poison. And now we can double into Roselia as Luvdisc uses a water gun on Gulpin for some reason, but 2 moves aren't enough to get the KO. Roselia sets up a Leech Seed, and Luvdisc falls to poison. And now we can finally see what the big bad Shadow Pokemon the admin of the Shadow Pokemon Lab holds. Last time, the big man Dakeem pulled a legendary Entei out of his back pocket, well over the levels we'd seen up until that point. And with us fighting supposedly the true admins of Cypher, I wonder what they would give to their head scientist. A fucking Delcatty. Delcatty is one of the most unfortunate Pokemon Game Freak have ever conjured up. In the mainline series, you could first catch a Skitty on one of the early routes of Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, a rare encounter at that, with an encounter rate of 2%. And then to get Delcatty, you need to use a Moonstone, which is already a pretty rare resource, but also a limited one. So surely, a Pokemon that requires this much time and effort to get, and then requires a valuable resource to evolve, should be pretty fun and exciting and useful, and why am I even phrasing this as a question? No, of course not. This Pokemon is absolute trash, with 0 redeemable qualities. Look, I'm not saying a rare Pokemon needs to be the most overpowered of overpowered broken Pokemon. In fact, I'm not even saying it needs to be strong. But when I say Delcatty has 0 redeeming qualities, that's not an exaggeration. Listen, I have a personal vendetta against Delcatty. Back in the days of Little Yashikin, my first playthrough Pokemon Emerald, Torchic just wasn't cutting it against Roxanne, so naturally I thought it was time to add a new member to my crew. Venturing outside of Rustboro onto Route 116, my very first encounter was cute little Skitty, me fully knowing how rare she was based solely on the fact that none of my friends had one or knew what she was. Carrying her on my team for 1, 2, 4 gyms, with her still not contributing much nor evolving, most kids would have given up, but not me. No, Little Yash had already opened up his third eye. He was on the 4th grade reading level at the age of 7. I was well versed in the teachings of green eggs and ham. I knew not to judge a book by its cover. I still remembered the secrets of Magikarp. And one day, this bright little genius remembered another rare pink Pokemon that he caught in a different game. One that required a special evolutionary stone to evolve. And words cannot express the euphoria I felt when I saw the green bar of hope, indicating to me that the moonstone I happened to stumble across in Meteor Falls would reward my patience and turn my cute little skitty into a monstrous water-flying dragon. It didn't take much thought and deliberation to figure out that this is exactly what my single moonstone was destined for. Okay, I was a little disappointed when I saw what it evolved into, but I liked cute Pokemon even back then. I still believed my brand new Delcathie had potential. But these are also the days when I still believed in Santa Claus, and that I could afford a home on a single household income. Before I knew I could search the base stats of a Pokemon, before I even knew they existed, how I judged the strength was by what moves a Pokemon could learn. And if there's one thing Delcathie can do, it's learn a lot of TMs. So imagine my shock and horror when my precious Delcathie, who I had fed the TMs for Shockwave, Ice Beam, and Shadow Ball, TMs that I believed to be unique, did jack shit for me the entire game. I brought her all the way to the Elite Four. When I was walled against Wallace, the water specialist champion, I believed that this was the reason why I taught her Shockwave. This is all what it was culminating to. You know what she did? She died. Like every time. I was betrayed. At the age of 7, I learned for the very first time that regardless of how much effort, attention, care and love you put into something, it can still disappoint you. Delcathie is a basic-ass normal Pokemon, learns very few good moves via level up, and has a god-awful stat spread, with a very middling, bordering on bad speed, with awful defenses and bulk. Its attack stat isn't too bad though, except I lied. This is the stat spread for Mightyena, a Pokemon that evolves from Poochyena at level 18, a common encounter that you can catch on the first route in the same game. Here's Delcathie's actual stats. Each one is either the same, or worse than Mightyena's. Attack taking a hit of 25 points and the rest taking a hit of 5. This makes her best stats HP and speed, clocking in at 70. What were they thinking when designing her? I would consider those to be mediocre stats on a Pokemon that specializes in something else. But nope, these are the best stats that she has to offer. But don't you worry, come Pokemon Sun and Moon, a bunch of Pokemon got some much needed buffs, including Delcathie finally receiving the tune-up she deserved by getting a whole 20 extra points in speed. Let's f***ing go! What a miserable little Pokemon. God, what have I spent a quarter of the video so far ranting about? We catch Delcathie, of course we catch Delcathie, we're groveling for every little breadcrumb they're feeding us at this point. It's also the first Pokemon that knows the move Shadow Rush, not anything like the Shadow Rush that we once knew. Now instead of a base power of 90, it has a base power of 55, a mere 15 points more than Shadow Blitz, no secondary effects nor an increased chance for crit either. A disappointing move for a disappointing Pokemon. So what was the reason behind us rescuing this criminal who'd stole from a charity, and me reliving my past trauma? It's so that they could complete a machine that makes purifying Shadow Pokemon even faster. Yay. All jokes aside, this is the single best addition to Gale of Darkness. It's a way to passively reduce the shadow gauge of your Pokemon through a system where you can place up to 9 Shadow Pokemon in the various sets. By placing non-Shadow Pokemon around them that create a super effective loop, you can increase the tempo, and this increases the rate at which their shadow gauge goes down. This actually creates a pretty fun puzzle and feedback loop where once you purify enough Pokemon to fill out a new set, you can purify even more Pokemon at once. And this encourages you to play around with different combinations to make the most efficient sets, and think about which Pokemon you want to purify next. And then you can go back to your adventure while these Pokemon become friendlier in the meantime. With there being nearly double the amount of Shadow Pokemon in Gale of Darkness, this was a much needed addition. And I think it's genuinely the most impactful contribution that makes this game replayable even in this year. Whereas Colosseum definitely shows its age. But you know who hasn't aged a single day? While raiding the Shadow Pokémon Lab, we found a laptop encrypted with the finest pin code technology. And you know that means that they have something spicy to hide. Well, the passcode wasn't 1234, so we needed our best and brightest minds back at the lab to crack the code. Unfortunately, it wasn't 9876 either, so we'll need some outside help. This brings us back to one of my favorite locations. Pirate Town isn't really too important to the story this time around, but in Colosseum this was the first place we really got to explore, and was the first indicator of how different these games would be from the mainline series, showing us a much grittier district riddled with crime and squalor. Felt just like home. With the town having been rid of the syndicate holding it hostage, we have new squatters taking residence in the building of the once reigning king. These are the same kids from the underground that did something during Pokémon Colosseum. I literally played this game 3 months ago and I still couldn't tell you their involvement in the story. Also, I can't believe they got rid of the underground in this game. That was my favorite town. Well, it's clear that they don't want us seeing their password guessing system, so they sent us on a wild goose chase, following around Duking from the last game, who also did something during the main campaign, visiting various Pokespots. These places are where we can catch a handful of wild Pokemon, but since they're still full of dreams and ambitions, they're pretty much useless to us. However, this detour wasn't completely devoid of value. Upon reaching the final Pokespot, Duking's nowhere to be seen. Instead, we're greeted by 2 familiar faces. Not ones that we're really interested in, but where there's smoke, there's fire, and there's only one man that can light the flame in my heart. Our beloved Mirror B makes his return. This is a divisive opinion, but I personally think he's had a glow up in every way. It's sad that his theme didn't make a return, but you know what? I like his new one better. I said it. Mirror B even has a nice shiny present for us. A Shadow Voltorb. Not a great Pokemon, but it's one of the faster ones we'll have access to. Well, meeting my hero was no accident. It was a masterfully thought out diversion so that Cypher could invade the Onbus building to prevent me decrypting the disc. They really don't want me seeing their browser history. Storming the building, we had to fight through an army of grunts, which means even more shadow Pokemon. I haven't really talked about any of my battles so far since none of them have really been worth mentioning, but now we're catching shadow Pokemon still around the same levels as the one that we caught outside the Shadow Pokémon Lab, while the enemy levels are starting to catch up with our own. The grunts in the building were still pretty easy, but by the time that we got to the top, the Gatekeeper's levels were 4 to 5 above our own, and he was using some pretty tough Pokemon to deal with, like Kadabra with his high special attack, and Vigoroth, which is pretty strong for a second stage. And the Pokemon that we got to catch is Ralts, who has worse stats than a baby Pokemon. Of course, this is the first level 20 Pokemon that we can get. This is a pretty good representation of the Pokemon that we've been able to catch so far. While Cypher are getting fancy evolved Pokemon with higher levels, we're still stuck with mediocre first stages like Vulpix and Duskull. Well, it's still a while until we have another admin battle, so we should be alright. Meet Cypher Commander Exol. Cypher Commander Exol is a cunt. Exol leads with Girafarig and Loudred, and I send out Delcatty and Gulpin. Girafarig, being a single stage Pokemon, already outclasses all of our Pokemon in terms of stats, being pretty strong and fast. It also gets 2 stab moves, Stomp doing over half to our bulkiest Pokemon, which even has a chance to flinch as demonstrated by its partner Loudred, who also does over half to our second bulkiest Pokemon. Both of them now being level 23, 6 levels above our highest level Pokemon. They could KO any mon in a single turn if they double into it. I try using Attract with Delcatty, which infatuates Pokemon of the opposite gender, giving them a 50% chance to miss a turn. This actually works out for us the next turn, until Loudred targets Delcatty, finishing him off, which unfortunately also removes the infatuation. Oh, and to compare how much damage we do, Delcatty, who is sadly our strongest Pokemon as of right now, does less than half to Loudred, who's actually relatively frail. This doesn't look too good for us. And then Gulpin even misses the Toxic, then enters reverse mode, hitting itself. What a disaster of a turn. Girafarig finishes him off the next turn with Confusion. This also reveals an annoying mechanic of the Gen 3 games, where in double battles, you send out a Pokemon immediately after one faints, meaning Spheal takes a stomp from Loudred just as she comes in. Houndour, with a super effective Shadow Blitz, does half the damage that Delcatty did. Oh, and Girafarig, along with its stabs, also gets coverage with Shockwave, taking out our poor Spheal before she could do anything. And even Loudred has a super effective Water Pulse for Houndour, a double KO in one turn. That was a kill from full health. And that's also one of the reasons these games can be so hard. Enemy Pokemon have surprisingly very good coverage, even when it comes to regular trainers. Well, onto our last 2 Pokemon, Mareep and Baltoy. Stomp from Girafarig brings Mareep all the way down to 1 HP from full, but somehow Baltoy is able to outspeed Loudred, finishing him off with a Stab Psybeam. I'm surprised we were actually able to get even 1 kill, but this does reveal to us a Shadow Pokemon that we very much want, Mawile at level 22. Well, us losing this battle isn't that bad, as the Mawile that came out doesn't have the ability that we want. I tried paralyzing Girafarig, but that was in vain as Mawile outspeeds to get the KO on Mareep, leaving Baltoy all by itself. A Stomp brings it down to 5 HP, and a not very effective Shadow Rush caps off the job. Well, that was a disaster. I don't think I've ever seen a Cypher Grunt victory pose before. Today was also the first time I learned that beating this battle is not required to progress. I've just never lost at this stage in the game. Well, even if we didn't want that Mawile, my pride wouldn't let me live this down, so while it's optional, it is a forced battle, so it doesn't really feel right letting it go. Also, if I didn't stress this enough, we really need that Mawile. While this isn't a Nuzlocke for hopefully obvious reasons now, I thought we'd bring back the reset counter much earlier than last time. While I went into this battle kind of unprepared, I wasn't really expecting a random grunt to annihilate me, but now that we know, we can put our new tools to use. This time I try to get rid of Girafarig as fast as possible. I use Gulpin as a sacrifice, who indeed gets one-shot by a super effective confusion. Loudred even doubles in, using Stomp on Sphere, doing over half. And a super effective Shadow Rush from Delcatty does about a quarter. God damn it, Delcatty. Sphere's diversion doesn't work as Girafarig attacks Delcatty, but does less than half this time. Good to know that's a roll, but at least Loudred falls for it, finishing Sphere off. No flinch, and another Shadow Rush confirms it's a 4-hit KO. Makihita's the next target dummy, and oh god, is that how much Stomp does to Houndour? We're so close now. And Girafarig couldn't resist the fresh kill in front of her. Shadow Rush finishes her off. Only took 4 sacrifices. Delcatty goes into reverse mode, Loudred brings him into the red, and then he hits himself, leaving Mareep all alone. She dies. Well, it's clear now that that's not the winning strategy, but I think I got some good info, and even this Mawile didn't have the right ability. Alright, same Pokemon. This time I actually decide to cleverly switch out Gulpin for Houndour, who's unaffected by the confusion, then gets crit by Stomp the same turn it comes in. Well, the plan's already fallen through, maybe we can salvage it. Loudred gets a crit on Delcatty, who survives, and then flinches. What happens if this strat actually works? Attempt 5. Houndour's unaffected by confusion, Loudred doesn't land a crit but leaves him on 1 HP, and we land an attract. Girafarig can't move, and this time I double into Loudred since it's frailer, and god, my Pokemon are so weak. Goodbye Houndour. Girafarig can't move again. Loudred hits Stomp on Sphere, doing over half. Delcatty just misses the kill with Shadow Rush, but Sphere can just flinch. And then she goes into reverse mode to hit herself. She didn't even do anything this turn. Girafarig finally gets a turn to move, and uses that turn to finish poor Sphere off. Loudred's able to outspeed, but doubles in, leaving Mareep on just 2 HP. Delcatty uses a Shadow Wave, doing some damage to Girafarig, and finally taking down Loudred. And once again, this brings out Mawile, this time with the ability that we've been looking for. Intimidate is possibly the single best ability in the game, as it lowers the opponent's attack on switch-in. You can abuse this to cripple basically any physical attacker. And in double battles, this affects both Pokemon on the opposing side. We need this Pokemon. Even if I won this battle, I would have reset if this Mawile didn't have it. Alright, we're down to our last 2 Pokemon, but Makihita did get a crit taking down Girafarig. This is the furthest we've gotten so far. What's his last Pokemon? A Raichu. A fully evolved Pokemon that's even faster than Girafarig, and gets Electric Stab. It doesn't sound that bad, but this only comes out after we've beaten the other 2, meaning she can just sweep up whoever's left. If it was at least slow, we could have doubled into it, but now, well, yeah. I've been trying my best not to switch around my team too much, as each trip to the PC is also quite long, but obviously if we keep losing then I'm just wasting time for no reason. If I haven't mentioned this yet during the video, battles take a long time in this game, with each turn taking up to a minute to run through, and you can't turn off animations. So, on to, and it's starting to get tiring now, attempt number 10. My 10th attempt actually goes far better, with us just being down to Mawile and Raichu, with 4 of my Pokemon still alive. With Raichu out, we're quite literally in the best position we could ever be in. She's even female, meaning she's weak to Delcatty's charms. Unfortunately, she sniffed us out, so she puts an end to Delcatty before he can even test out his game. But that's fine. Mawile still can't do much damage, and Raichu can't target 2 mons at once. Shadow Blitz doesn't do too much. I decided to start chucking balls now, as that could be a free kill, and we don't really have many ways to improve the odds anyway. It doesn't work the first time, and Duskull takes a lot from Shockwave, barely surviving the Shadow Rush. Shadow Blitz isn't a 4-hit KO, but we're so close. We throw another ball, 1 shake, 2 shakes, 3 shakes, and then Raichu snipes Makihita instead, bringing him all the way down into the red. At least Mawile targets Duskull instead, but we really didn't want Makihita taking even more damage. Okay, I'll be honest, my confidence is mostly gone now. God, I didn't realize how weak Makihita is. It's as strong as Houndour, who's a special attacker. I try one last ball, and Mawile, please. 1 shake, 2 shakes, 3 shakes. No. Mawile finishes Makihita off, but Raichu digs a hole instead. Alright, this battle's lost, but we still do have one last attempt for a ball. And Mawile stays in. It doesn't matter now, Raichu, do whatever you want. Just having this Pokemon changes everything. I said it doesn't feel right skipping this battle even though you're allowed to lose. Discard that. Yash is an idiot. Yash had no clue what he was talking about. Age wisens a man, and in these past 2 hours, I've grown. Sometimes winning the battle isn't the most important thing, it's what you learn and take away from it. Are you fucking serious? So, I forgot something about this game. Differently to Pokémon Colosseum, when you lose a battle, you are actually not allowed to keep the Shadow Pokémon that you caught. It either remains on the enemy team, or if it's a one attempt battle, it runs away. This also happens if you accidentally kill it. This is the first time in 10 attempts where I've successfully caught it. See, I've been playing this battle with the assumption that I'd eventually catch it, and then I can just move on like I was about to if the battle ended up being too hard. The light at the end of the tunnel has been extinguished. So you might be thinking, okay then Yash, why not just move on? You've already decided that this battle's not worth playing. Well sure, but let me reiterate this. We need more while. This isn't an exaggeration, you've seen this battle, and how important one good encounter can be. I don't want to spoil anything, but Morwhile will be a very important Pokemon to us. I wish I was being dramatic. We need to win this battle because we need Morwhile. Also, he can't just keep getting away with this. Okay, I've been trying to brute force this. Clearly this isn't working. I need to actually use my noggin. Quite frankly, I don't think there's a consistent way to do this. And while I did catch a bunch of Pokemon, I don't really think many of them are worth using anyway. Sure, Duskull is a ghost type who's immune to Stomp, but he has almost no damage output. Well, that was until I remembered there's something that I hadn't checked. While Pokemon in this game don't learn any new moves through TMs or level up, they all have moves aside from their shadow moves that they gradually remember as their shadow gauge goes down. And if we're already using cheesy moves, we might as well make the most of it. So after spending a good amount of time just making my Pokemon friendlier to me, with some trial and error, I bring you, and I shit you not, attempt number 17. Exol leads with Girafarig and Loudred, and we send out Duskull and Makihita. Makihita is there for the same reason as last time, to bait an ineffective confusion. Because Duskull's on the field, even Loudred doubles into Houndour, who just came out. Duskull can now safely confuse Girafarig with Confuse Ray, a move I really wish I unlocked sooner. This means she now has a 50% chance to hit herself, and more importantly, lose a turn. Houndour's basically just here to be a sack now, but he does manage to get off some damage on Loudred, as a super effective Water Pulse gets the KO. Since both mons have moved now, I can safely bring out Mareep, as Duskull also confuses Loudred. With both Pokemon confused, we're in a much safer position. I snap Duskull out of reverse mode as I don't want him taking too much passive damage, and Girafarig hits itself. Loudred pushes past, however, hitting a Stomp, bringing Mareep into red. But she doesn't flinch and gets off a Thunder Wave on Girafarig, paralyzing her. Now she only has a 3 in 8 chance to move. Now Loudred hits itself, and since we outspeed the giraffe, Duskull can do some damage to both Pokemon with Shadow Wave, while Mareep can also paralyze Loudred. Duskull's going through his rebellious phase. Girafarig snaps out of confusion to use a Stomp on Mareep, but she's done all she needed to. Good job, Mareep. And with the entire turn done with, out comes Delcatty. Duskull can now outspeed to reconfuse the giraffe, and decide the safer play is to get rid of Loudred as soon as possible. Girafarig pushes through, but wastes a turn using Odor Sleuth. Loudred also snaps out, but uses a Water Pulse on Duskull. That's fine. We're getting pretty unlucky here, but as long as Delcatty doesn't take too much damage, we can salvage this. And now Shadow Wave from Delcatty can do some damage to Girafarig, and also take down Loudred. Morwhile's out. And he has Intimidate. Okay, this run's worth going through. I wasn't quite sure if Loudred was in range for a kill, so I also used Shadow Wave with Duskull, which does some chip. Girafarig once again somehow pushes through to use a Stomp on Duskull, which it can now hit thanks to the last turn. Duskull's done great, even though it was a bit angsty. We just got really unlucky. I said that we don't really have to worry about Morwhile, but even a not very effective Shadow Rush does a lot to Makihita. But we can now both double in, putting an end to the oppressive miasma known as giraffes. And finally Raichu's out. Now this may look like a worse situation than last time, but my Pokemon are much healthier, and more importantly, Delcatty's alive. I need Raichu to target Makihita, and since I know he's not outspeeding, I use his turn to throw a ball. Which catches Morwhile on the first attempt. After seeing how much he did, that could have actually turned the tides. Unfortunately, Raichu hits Shockwave on Delcatty, doing over half. We use Attract, but now one more attack from her and it's over. Raichu is immobilized. We can both double into her to do just about half. I'm not sure if that's a roll. And then Makuhita gets paralyzed, and Raichu pushes through using Shockwave. On Delcatty, we were so close. And then Makuhita can't move. It was going so well. Alright, we may have lost the surefire win, but there is still a chance. It all comes down to this move, and it's a 50-50. Which manages to land, Raichu being baited into using Dig, with our cute little Vulpix doing the exact same thing. And now what this means is that since Raichu outspeeds, it'll use Dig first, missing, and then we can use our Dig to hit for super effective damage. And Makuhita, who's now paralyzed, still pushes through to use a Guts boosted, super effective Shadow Blitz, finishing Raichu off and getting us past this Arceus Forsaken battle. How is it that a battle against a trainer using level 23 Pokemon is the most hype I've ever felt playing through these games? Exol, shut the fuck up. You know I am. Hey, you know what would rub even more salt on Exol's wounds? If he was the reason that this video got even more likes and that you subscribe to the channel. You know, if you're enjoying the video so far, I would kind of appreciate that. And yeah, I'm sure he would absolutely hate that. Please? Through blood, sweat, and tears, we have pushed through the hardest battle in the game so far, and are ever so closer to the end of the game. Oh, this isn't even halfway through the game. Well, surely it can't get harder, right? Surely now that we've gone through this segment, we can finally catch stronger Shadow Pokemon, making the next few battles easier. Right? You poor naive fool. On a brighter note, the next part of the game is something I have fond memories of. We make our way back to Phenac City, the first city of the first game, and it's very different to what it was in Colosseum. Oh, okay, maybe later. Almost a real gem tower, I guess. This was the final dungeon of the last game, but now it's basically another Colosseum. They did add this new cool Battle CD minigame where each CD puts you in a certain battle scenario, where you're given a preset team and you have to beat the trainer within a certain set of turns. This creates a really fun puzzle that showcases some of the more niche battle mechanics and gimmicks, a few of which I actually learned through playing this game mode back in the day. I really wish the newer Pokemon games would do little things like these, especially with how much the mechanics have evolved over the years. Well, we don't really have any business here, so back to Phenac City. I mean, I'm not really sure what else she was expecting me to do there. There's quite a few changes from Colosseum. The runner seems to have switched out his cast form for a Duskull, but I've found a new appreciation for Duskull since our last battle, so I'm happy. For some reason the shop's closed and there's no Nurse Joy in the Pokemon Center, so we can't really heal our Pokemon here either. Well, Phenac City also has a Colosseum, so maybe we have to battle through there. It's actually kind of interesting that we haven't been forced to do a Colosseum yet. Okay, nope, maybe not. Alright, what about the gym? Surely the gym has battles. It's about time that they finally start teaching the important lessons when it comes to Pokemon. Well, we're lacking in entertainment here, but luckily for us, we find a music disc by some pop idol. Something which this manly man, this Herculean mass of pure muscle, this absolute pinnacle of male masculinity doesn't need nor want. So it's all ours. What a suspicious thing to say after uncovering a secret. I'm most definitely getting silenced here if I stay any longer. Well, I'm actually kind of insecure now. We can't let our masculinity be challenged, so dump this stupid CD off on a stupid girl, and we do something more fitting for real men. We invade the privacy of a young woman living by herself. Okay, look, not the best look for my character, but whoa, look at how much she drinks. Yeah, let's shame her for that instead. Well, after rummaging for some credit cards, bank statements, birth certificates, anything of value really, we find a letter written by the mayor, detailing an incoming attack on Phenac City. Why this man decided to use a fax machine when instant messaging technology exists in this universe to telegraph a literal invasion is beyond me. Not even mentioning the fact that the gym is right next door to him. Maybe he's just old-fashioned like that. Apparently Cypher have been slowly kidnapping people and taking their places throughout Phenac City, and this was such a mind-blowing revelation for me back then. Probably obvious to most people who play through it now, but I did not suspect a thing when I was a kid. But that's not what I remember most clearly. The most vivid memory I have of this game from my first time was me shitting myself on this jump scare. It's so evil. This is probably the most sense of dread I've felt up until that point in my life. Now it's just an everyday occurrence. Well, another Cypher Grunt, another Shadow Pokemon. Oh boy, a Snorunt. That's 2 levels below the Mawile we just caught. Why? Thankfully, her levels aren't as high as Exol's, and Mawile with Intimidate and Shadow Rush is already proving her value. We get ambushed walking downstairs, 1 more Shadow Pokemon. Whoa, Pineco, no way. Again, 2 levels below Mawile. Okay, a lot of justies, but we can head straight into the gym. Oh wow, even more grunts. Can't wait to see what they have for me. Oh, and Natsu, you shouldn't have. No, seriously, why? Wait, Roselia is actually pretty decent. It has potential, a grass type with some pretty good support moves, and probably the highest special attack among the Pokemon that we currently have. It is stuck with the weakest special shadow move though. Alright, can't complain about this one, but the admin's coming up and we really need at least 1 or 2 more decent encounters. My point proven as we're swept by the next Grunt's Kadabra, now pretty much matching the levels of Exol. This thing has Thunder Punch, which in this generation is a special move. Even our fastest Mon Voltorb can't outspeed and just gets sniped by Psybeam. Well, Kadabra finally goes down, but out comes Miss Dravis in its stead, who pretty much sweeps up the rest of my team. And that's another wipe. The coverage grunts get is insane. It's sad the mainline series never did take after these games. Well, I did go into this battle unhealed, so our next attempt goes a lot better. Kadabra opts not to attack, and Morwell even gets a crit. God, he was definitely worth the effort. With none of my mons harmed, Miss Dravis 2 goes down easier. Which means Shadow Pokemon time. Please, just one more good one. Meowth. That's right. And its attacking stat is on par with Makuhita, a Mon 5 levels below, who was one of our weaker Pokemon. God, not a single one of these Pokemon actually outclasses any of our current team. Delcatty, who we caught almost 8 hours ago now, is still one of my best. I'm sorry for all the shit I chat earlier, buddy. In all fairness, Meowth at least gets Shadow Rush too, which makes up a little for its low attack. But it's no more while. We've still got a couple of grunts on the way to the Colosseum, so hope's not lost. Swinub. Okay. Its stats? Oh, who am I kidding? They're all shit. Sorry, Swinub, I love you really, but now's not the time. We're entering the Colosseum, he's right there. 2 grunts. Okay, one of you. One of you must have something. You know, I'm not even asking for good. I'm asking for serviceable fuck. Are you the last one? Fine, just get it out of the way. Rip the bandage off. Grimer. You are literally serving me a pile of sludge. I love Grimer too, he's such a happy little guy, but come on. Okay, hold on, one more grunt. We must fight him, he's protecting the admin. We do. You're the second in command. What do you have for me? This has to be a joke. 8 Pokemon. 8 out of 9 Pokemon we've caught since Morwell. And they're all shitmons who don't even outclass the Pokemon that we caught 2 hours into the game. I know this must seem like a giant overreaction, but trust me, it's warranted. Whatever, on to the next admin. Man, these admins don't even look as cool as the other game. I mean, the others were ridiculous too, but at least in a weirdly intimidating way. And we've now learned that these are the main commanders from the headquarters, the ones from Colosseum being just the regional branch managers. Tell me, who the f feels shivers down their spine when they hear the name Snattle? Well, unfortunately, we don't get a chance to heal before the battle, so this first one's pretty much to get some info. Snattle leads with Lantern and Quagsire, and we send out Duskull and Voltorb on the verge of death. Level 26. This is rough. Well, Voltorb does outspeed, but look at that damage. Both Lantern and Quagsire double into Duskull before he even gets a chance to move. Well, both Pokemon are water types, we eat grass. Quagsire doubly so, and luckily for us, we happen to catch a great one. Well, it would be a real shame if our only grass type with levels that actually holds up with the enemy has no grass moves at all. Oh, bet you didn't see that one coming. Lantern finishes Voltorb off, but does get paralyzed by static. Roselia is actually able to take the enemy attacks pretty well, but after being doubled into twice, Roselia goes down. Look, we already know this battle's a lost cause, but with Delcatty as the last one standing, we're actually able to take Lantern down, already revealing our next Shadow Pokemon, Lunatone. This is actually a solid encounter. In a regular game, it's kind of disappointing, but considering the Pokemon that we've been catching so far, a single stage Pokemon with serviceable stats and a usable special move is the best we could ask for. Anyway, Delcatty dies. Next attempt. Now we have a full team, fully healed. I'll lead with Duskull and Roselia, hopefully with better luck this time. Roselia does at least get some pretty good support moves, Grass Whistle having a 50% chance to put the opponent to sleep, and Leech Seed, which can do some passive damage and recover back some of our HP, but I would have really preferred to see either of them being replaced by a real grass move. Roselia eats Lantern's Facade, and we set up a Leech Seed on Quagsire. Leech Seed drains 1/12 of the enemy's HP every turn, and 100% of that HP goes back to the user, or whichever Pokemon's in that slot. Quagsire uses a Rock Tomb for speed control, but Roselia eats that pretty well too. Duskull, actually alive this time, confuses Lantern. The good thing about both the enemy Pokemon is that they both have a high base HP, meaning Roselia recovers back a pretty large percentage of her HP. Lantern hits itself, but Roselia with its speed lowered, gets hit by Quag's Ice Punch, finishing him off. Now we can bring more Wild out, and Duskull can confuse Quag as well. Leech Seed thankfully remains even after the user faints, and the Pokemon coming in reaping the benefits. Lantern's able to move this turn, hitting Shockwave, doing just less than half to Mawile, and Quag goes for Duskull this time. I try using an Iron Defense just to prepare for a ground move, and Duskull keeps attempting to get some meager chip damage. However, it was his last try as Ice Punch from Quagsire lands a crit, putting him back in the grave. Lantern once again misses a turn, and Shadow Rush from Mawile does a decent amount. I bring out Voltorb and unfortunately throw a bit, outspeeding to use Shadow Panic while both Pokemon are still confused. Lantern's ever so close to going down, and Quag opts to use a weak Rock Tomb just for the speed drop. Voltorb uses Shadow Rush, and despite Lantern being low, she manages to survive, then hitting herself for the self KO. I actually thought that Voltorb would have gotten the kill, so I let Mawile target Quagsire. Worked out in the end. And the Leech Seed drains the last of Quagsire's HP. The next Pokemon's an interesting choice, but a welcome one. Cast Form. Unfortunately, Voltorb misses the Shadow Panic on Lunatone, and also Cast Form. About a 1 in 5 chance. Cast Form's an interesting Pokemon. It changes depending on the weather, and for this generation has the signature move Weather Ball, which while clear does stab normal damage, but when the weather's up, does damage of the respective type. Funnily enough, this doesn't quite apply to the new weather added called Shadow Sky, which Lunatone sets up. Now Shadow Sky does two things. It powers up Shadow moves by 50% and deals some chip, like Sandstorm, to non-Shadow Pokemon. As you can tell, this is nothing but a benefit to us. Now Weather Ball from Cast Form will do double in power in typeless damage. That part sucks. I don't know why it couldn't have just been a Shadow move. Voltorb, why? Combined with the last turn, this was about a 2.5% chance. Cast Form resorts to using a Water Pulse for some reason, but targets the still healthy Mawile. Maybe the AI still thinks Weather Ball is a normal move. However, with the Shadow Sky boost and Voltorb being close to death, a not very effective Shadow Wave brings him all the way down, while putting Mawile below half. Shadow Rush isn't quite able to finish Cast Form off, and even the Sky damage doesn't quite do enough. But this isn't a bad situation to be in. Cast Form will die the next turn, and if we can catch Lunatone, the final Pokemon will be by itself. The first ball fails, Shadow Wave taking Mawile down and leaving us with our last two Pokemon. Delcatty tries to do some chip with Shockwave, but we're reminded of how weak it truly is. Cast Form succumbs to the Shadow Sky, bringing out Snattle's last Pokemon, Matang. Houndour's on the field. I thought this was still salvageable, but look at how much a not very effective Shadow Wave did. And this is with an attack debuff as it targets two Pokemon. Then Matang doubles into him with Thunder Punch, finishing up the job. And yeah, Delcatty's most certainly not doing this by itself, so that's another attempt down. Okay, we lost, but this one doesn't feel nearly as futile as Exol. I think we actually have a solid chance getting through this, provided that we catch Lunatone within a reasonable amount of turns. We definitely want Lunatone. We did also land some pretty bad rolls when it came to missing moves, so surely attempt 4 should go much better. This time I lead with Voltorb and Roselia. Voltorb outspeeds to use Shadow Panic. How? How have you missed 6 times in a row now? It's a 60% chance to land. Leech Seed on Quag while both of my mons get targeted individually. This works out perfectly as now Roselia can survive the next attack and land another Leech Seed, this time on Lantern. Now we'll recover back double the amount of HP each turn. Voltorb finally lands Shadow Panic, missing Lantern but confusing Quagsire. Quag still manages to hit the Ice Punch, and Voltorb helps him with the job, hitting itself, surviving on 1 HP. I don't want Roselia taking passive damage, so we snap him out of reverse mode, and Lantern targets Voltorb for the kill, with Quagsire doubling into that slot with Ice Punch, hitting Duskull. I next try putting Quagsire to sleep, but of course it fails, and then he goes back into reverse mode. Quagsire snaps out of confusion and hits Roselia with Rock Tomb. The confused didn't even matter. I thought I said this attempt would go better. And Duskull is about to die and probably wouldn't get a chance to move, so switching to Houndour. We can save Duskull to second for a free switch in. Roselia takes the facade, and Houndour eats a not very effective Ice Punch. Grass Whistle actually puts Lantern to sleep, and our Leech Seeds now recover back all the damage we take from Lantern. So I was saving Duskull for later, but we can now take advantage of the Leech Seed situation to get some HP back in him. Houndour does some measly chip damage. Why are my Pokemon so angsty? I swear they've been going into reverse mode every other turn. Well, it doesn't matter anyway as Rock Tomb puts him to sleep. Okay, looks like reverse mode recall takes precedence. Sorry Duskull. Already on our last 3 Pokemon and we haven't even fainted one. At least we can bring out Delcatty, he can also take advantage of the Leech Seeds. And he can even use an attract on Lantern. Roselia, please just stay normal. Lantern wakes up, but she hits herself. And Roselia manages to put even Quack to sleep. Roselia, I swear to God, you're lucky you landed that grass whistle. Shadow Rush just misses the kill, but Leech Seed drains the last of Lantern's HP. Alright, how long will Lunatone take to catch? Lunatone is faster, but sets up a Shadow Sky for us. And Roselia lands another grass whistle. Delcatty uses a Shadow Rush on Quagsire, which crits bring him down. God, these Pokemon are actually putting in work. Castform comes in. She shouldn't be much of a threat by herself. Lunatone's asleep, so we may as well try our only Ultra Ball, and nope, it didn't even pretend to work. Oh god, Weather Ball does a lot. Even with Castform's mediocre stats. Even Shadow Rush with the Sky Boost does less than half. Well, I shouldn't complain too much. Castform is 10 levels above Delcatty. He's doing the best he can. Still asleep, so back to Great Balls. I've had my heart broken before. And the second ball catches it! Alright, now I'm fully invested. We need to win this one. Castform does finish off Roselia, however, meaning as Snazzle's final Pokemon Metang comes out, we send out Mawile. Both of us on our last 2 bonds. Level 28. We're really struggling now. Shadow Rush just needs to hit one more time. Even the Shadow Sky helps us get some chip in. Both of our mons are slower, but the AI throws. Castform using Water Pulse on Mawile. Metang uses a weak Metal Claw that still does over half to Delcatty. At least it didn't get an attack boost. And now both Mawile and Delcatty use the Shadow Wave to target both Pokemon, doing some chip to Metang and finishing Castform off, leaving Metang all by itself. Oh no, Delcatty's in reverse mode. Okay, now we need some really good luck here. Thankfully, Metang spares Delcatty for one more turn, using Thunder Punch on Mawile, meaning both Pokemon can use a super effective Shadow Rush, bringing Metang low. Oh no, Mawile, not you too. And the Shadow Sky fades, we're so close. Metang's gonna get a kill, so we need to put this down in one more turn. Metang uses Confusion and targets Delcatty. I'm sorry Delcatty, but that was for the best. As Mawile, with its higher attack stat, uses a super effective Shadow Rush, which does indeed do enough to bring Metang down, us winning the second admin battle with a single Pokemon alive. That was insanely close. If Metang even once chose to end Delcatty's life early, it would have all gone wrong. I don't even want to think about having to deal with Lunatone in the other slot if the second ball didn't work. Honestly, I think I was a bit too confident with this battle. If I didn't get lucky, this could have easily taken as many attempts as Exol, with just how overleveled the enemy Pokemon are now. We've gone from being 5 levels under to 10. I've now got a newfound appreciation for Roselia, Mawile, and even Delcatty. They aren't great in the regular games, well, Mawile without the Mega, but they have been more than pulling their weight in this game. Not gonna lie, would still prefer some better Pokemon, but they're doing their best. Well, with us having defeated the second admin and catching ourselves a level 25 Lunatone, surely the next batch of Pokemon should be way better than the trash that we've caught since Mawile, except for you. You poor naive fool. Before we can even worry about new Shadow Pokemon, we need to actually be able to get to the next location first. And our crappy little moped just isn't cutting it anymore. We need an upgrade. Well, I don't think the regular mechanic's gonna give us quite what we need. If we want to relive our glory days, we need the genius of an old friend. Unfortunately, Chopin doesn't quite remember me. Man, Chopin's the best. On one side, he has the Ruler of the Seas, one of the strongest Pokemon to use in the playthrough. And on the other, he has his little buddy. Well, that's not all he has up his sleeves. Beating him wasn't enough to jog his memories of our unbreakable bond just yet, and he pulls out his ult. Hidden beneath the well was his secret creation, Mecha Groudon. I cannot convey how much in awe I was when I saw this thing for the first time, and then the subsequent disappointment I felt after realizing that we don't actually fight it. So what does Mecha Groudon do? Well, apparently it holds a Sunstone. Well, it was a disappointing battle, but if we want anyone specking out our bike, it's him. But of course he's too busy for his old pal. Okay, guess we'll just support the local business. Wow, our moped hovers now. Such innovative technology. I'm sure it couldn't get any better than this. With our new wheels, we can traverse deeper into the portion of the desert to find the ship from the start of the game. Us clearly not having any real career in Pokemon battles, may as well start scouting out a new cardboard box to call home. And the ship already comes with everything that we need. We got unopened crates of Poké Food, vital vitamins lying around for the taking, and even some fresh food if things go really bad. The toxic sludge leaking out the walls isn't too promising, But what affordable housing aren't fixer-uppers these days? Well, I mentioned fresh food, but the way this game's been going for me, I might be the food in question. We should probably drive off the other squatters before they get the same idea. And a new Cypher agent means a new slave friend. Lunatone's a pretty solid Pokemon. Being able to set up a Shadow Sky whenever we want is super helpful and makes battles go by far quicker. Well, Lunatone would have been great here if it wasn't weak to both Pokemon. Granted, the damage we're doing is still far from great. The levels are really starting to hurt us again. Usually after an important battle, regular trainers are scaled back a bit, but this Cypher Grunt has levels pretty much matching Snazzle. But look at that damage coming off a weak Shadow Wave when it's under Shadow Sky. Okay, still no Shadowmon, but it's fine. One more Pokemon to go. Coughing, not great, but the levels could set it apart, and Poison has some decent utility. It's not a Shadow Pokemon. That's all he has. Where's my Shadow Pokemon? Alright, fine, maybe the next Grunt. Oh, okay, we don't even fight him. Maybe I'm just being overly cautious. The next section's the main Shadow Pokemon factory. Plenty to catch there before the next big fight, surely. Sadly, someone's already set up camp here, and we're an honorable squatter. And hey, the ship's a big place. Plenty of room for there to be accidents. We'll put a pin in this plan for now. So, remember me throwing a tantrum some time ago when catching our new Shadow Pokemon? A little bit of an overreaction, right? Snazzle wasn't even really that hard of a battle. We even got a level 25 Lunatone. I did kind of allude to the idea that the Shadow Pokemon we would catch later would be just as trash, maybe even worse. Well, I lied. The Shadow Pokemon we'll soon catch aren't actually too bad. Pretty decent levels, and many mons are actually viable again. It is a bit of a shame, however, that we won't be able to catch any of them for the next half of the remaining game. Disembarking off the ship, we meet a kindred spirit. Oh, sorry, never mind, I read his name wrong. These folk happen to be grunts of the exact Team Snag'em from the last game. The one our last protagonist was an ex-member of. Well, they spout off some generic grunt stuff, rallying to claim our snag machine for themselves. So time for another battle, and maybe another Shadow Pokemon. Wait, what? They can do that? That's right. For this section, we can't catch any Shadow Pokemon at all. Meaning Lunatone, Roselia, and all those shipmons we caught. Yeah, they were the last of the Shadow Pokemon we'll get for the next big battles. Allow me a moment to list a few reasons why I hate our protagonist compared to the last one. 1. His face disgusts me. 2. His bike is worse in every imaginable way from Wes's. 3. What's going on with those eyes? 4. Wes made his entrance by blowing up the headquarters of the long-feared Team Snag'em, stealing their snag machine, and then reducing their base to rubble, escaping on his cool bike. Our brand new protagonist, the face of the game, gets his snag machine stolen by Team Snag'em. 5. His face disgusts me. Well, we've already gone through a significant portion, so it's more like 25% of the remaining game now. But oh man, trust me, after a couple of battles coming up, it sure will feel like half of the game. First up, let's see what the big deal behind this factory was anyway. Well, the Snag'em grunts are here, but of course we're not getting our snag machine back this soon. And his big man Zook, looking happening as always. Oh man, they knew what they were doing. Why would you show me Zangoose now of all times? Well, the levels aren't great, but thankfully as Zangoose, a Shadow Pokemon, comes out first, we can focus all in on the other slot. That doesn't mean that Zangoose isn't a threat at all, but at least we can guarantee they'll only hit not very effective moves. Mawile even lowers its attack. Both opposing Pokemon are of course faster, but both deal weak damage as Dojiro has no stat for Lunatone nor Mawile. Lunatone, despite having some pretty great special attack for this game, gets Rock Tomb, a physical move, as its only relearnable move for some reason. But its stab still do more than Shadow Wave. Mawile can double in, bringing out Carvanha. Thankfully Zook's other Pokemon seem to be quite weak, but with Chip from Zangoose and reverse mode triggering I swear every turn now, Lunatone's in bad shape. Carvanha shouldn't be able to get a kill from there, unless it crits. Why can't I have at least one easy battle? Well, Shadow Rush does bring it down all the way to red, but Voltorb is able to outspeed, electrocuting Carvanha before he can move. I snap Mawile out of reverse mode. Seviper's a bit scarier, but Voltorb manages to land the Shadow Panic on both opposing Pokemon. Seviper still moves past that to use a Poison Tail, which, oh my god, but then gets paralyzed by static. We chip away at it with Shadow Rush, but Voltorb Sudokus itself with the recoil. into Roselia, who can land a lead seed on Zang, so we can do some passive damage and recover some HP in the meanwhile. So Viper once again pushes through, but Roselia eats fairly well. I don't want Roselia taking even more damage, so into Duskull as Zangoose hits itself. And now Morwell can outspeed to finish the Viper off with Shadow Rush. If only we had a grass type move. Relicanth could actually be a threat, but Water Gun doesn't do too much. But neither does Shadow Rush. We at least confuse it. I'll let Morwell be sacked to bring in Roselia, who eats a weak Water Gun. Set up Leech Seed the next turn. How does Relicanth outspeed? Won't lie, that's kinda rough. But we have our old reliable Delcatty. Speedy fish, oh god. Delcatty might be by itself soon. He can at least use Attract, potentially giving us a free turn. That was a crit? Well, Leech Seed gets the kill anyway. And now we can focus in on Relicanth. This Pokemon has not been affected by neither the confusion nor the infatuation yet. But Duskull survives. Shadow Rush not doing too much, and come on. The Shadow Gauge doesn't make a difference. Reverse mode is forever. Relicanth, please. And now it's just Delcatty. You're killing me. How have you dodged a 50% chance 7 times in a row now? This has happened twice throughout this game now. It's over. If it uses a Rock Tomb one more time, it's over. Finally! Come on Delcatty, this is why I told you Shockwave all those years ago. Shockwave finishes Relicanth off, ending this battle way closer than it really should have been. Delcatty, don't get me wrong, I still stand by everything I said. But goddamn, I'm actually starting to respect you. We really got screwed over with RNG towards the end. We could have won that pretty easily otherwise. Though I'm surprised Relicanth was that good, even with the weak moves. Actually, you know what? The levels are really throwing me off. Obviously, it'll be good with an 8 level advantage. And we're not even allowed into the factory. Well, after getting a message from ONBS, we go on a wild goose chase looking around for the Snag'em hideout. This brings us back to the first location of the last game, the Outskirt Diner. And you know what? Never mind. It was all worth it. We have another battle with Mirror B. He uses a full team of Lombre, making use of rain tactics. I start with Shadow Sky, which he immediately overrides with Rain Dance. Wow, such foresight. Sadly, Lunatone doesn't have a great matchup here, being weak to both of the stabs, but Lombre targets Morwell. Shadow Rush doesn't even do half. Now both Lombre outspeed with their ability Swift Swim, doubling speed in Rain, and then even gets a crit. The second one finishes Lunatone off before he can even move. Shadow Rush brings it low. Morwell, why? Water Gun does a lot even to Morwell now, but Roselia resists both stabs, so he eats. Shadow Wave picks up a kill and even does some chip. Well, yeah, Morwell wasn't surviving. Come on, Delcatty. Though he does have to take a Water Gun on the switch in. And then both Lombre double in on Delcatty. One even using Mega Drain to recover some HP back. Sorry Delcatty, this wasn't your fault. The health regain was enough to keep Lombre just barely alive. But the rain subsides. And now Voltorb can outspeed using Spark. Voltorb, why? And Shadow Wave picks up the kill. The other Lombre can't even move. Roselia, why? And poor Mirror B even brought me a present, not knowing that I have no way to accept it. If Team Snag'em has one thing to answer for, it's forcing me to insult Mirror B's generosity. Outspeed with Voltorb for the kill, but Roselia misses Leech Seed. Well, if that's the amount of damage that Nosepass does, we can probably do without it. It's the thought that counts. It's the man! Ludicolo 2 is a rain abuser, but is forced to set it up for itself. Voltorb, come on bud, we gotta talk about this. Roselia lands the seed. Ludicolo uses Astonish, a 20 BP ghost move, instead of a water move for some reason. Voltorb lands Shadow Panic, confusing both mons. I knew you had it in you. Shadow Wave even lands a crit on Ludicolo. Well, after a barrage of attacks, with Ludicolo being adamant on using Astonish, she finally goes down. Nosepass being on the timer doesn't really manage to do much until Roselia pulls the trigger. Roselia, why? I literally snapped him out the last turn. Thankfully, Mirror B was feeling merciful today and knew I needed a win to get my spirits up. Sadly, Willy, the first trainer from the last game, isn't nearly as good at reading the room, challenging me to a battle before I could even heal. Yeah, we weren't winning this one with half my mons dead, and half the mons alive being on the verge of death. Look, it's a forced battle, but we don't need to win to progress, and I'm way beyond winning this game the honorable way. A freebie is a freebie. Well, the reason we returned here is to talk to an informant who has the whereabouts for the Team Snag'em hideout. I don't know why we have to go through this whole song and dance. Shouldn't the Team Snag'em hideout be public knowledge now? Wait, he saved a shadow Pokemon, and he wants me to take care of it. This is the salvation I've been seeking. This next part is going to be absolute hell, and this angel has brought me exactly what I've been looking for all this time. Tell me, Hordell, what do you have for me? And that finally brings us to the Team Snag'em hideout. What a journey it's been without our snag machine, but it's time to finally reclaim what's rightfully ours. Okay, it's obviously not been that much time. We had like 2 major battles, both of which I beat first try, and a minor battle which I may have lost, but let's not talk about that. But didn't I say something about it being the next half of the remaining game? Surely the game's not that short, right? Well, you'd be correct. Actual content-wise, me saying that we were shadowless for the next half of the game was a bit of an exaggeration. However, time-wise, it's a different story. See, I was expecting to run into a roadblock at some point. After Exol, I knew there was no way that would be the hardest battle. What I wasn't expecting was just how colossal and imposing and muscular of a roadblock it would be. Because would you believe me if I told you that in the Team Snag'em hideout, I spent 6 hours trying to get through a single battle, and that wasn't even the only one I struggled on. Thankfully, most of the grunts on the base are optional. You only trigger a battle if you talk to them. That is until we reach the final staircase. Walking up, I started to feel an impending sense of doom, unknowing that I would be staring at the walls of this office for the next 8 hours. This absolute leviathan of a man towers over our puny snag machine, drawing my attention to the arms of the protagonist for the very first time. Does Mum even feed us? Gonzap's arm literally has the same girth as our character's body, but we don't even get the pleasure of finding out how screwed we truly are until we beat Waken first. I was fooling myself if I thought I could have even won the battle outside the SS Libra if we did fight then and there. Waken leads with 2 Gloom, and I just stick to my winning strategy. I've been trying to find a way to showcase Lunatone, but every important battle so far seems to have Pokemon that specifically counter it. Shadow Wave does a bit, and Shadow Rush even brings one below half. Okay, doesn't seem too bad yet. What could go wrong? Well, the same thing that went wrong outside the ship. Gloom gets the move Sleep Powder, a 75% chance to put us to sleep. Sleep in this generation being a giant pain in the ass, lasting anywhere from 2 to 5 turns. And this isn't competitive Pokemon. The AI are free to spam as much Sleep Powder as they want, and us not being able to KO them in 1 turn means that there's no way to stop them. But that's not it. Both Gloom also get the move Giga Drain, doing a lot of damage with Gloom's surprisingly decent special attack and level advantage, which in turn means that they recover back a large amount of HP as well. But now we really need to think this through. Thankfully, only the female Gloom has Sleep Powder, so we can focus in on it. But who's next? Mantine. Usually a mediocre Pokemon, but one with an immense amount of special bulk, and considering we're already struggling when it comes to damage output, this is not one we want to be up against. It also gets water and flying moves, which hit all of our Pokemon at least neutrally, and it's not even that weak. Well, Leech Seed believes in equality, so it'll always do the same amount of damage every turn regardless of bulk, and taking that HP for ourselves certainly doesn't hurt. A stab 4x super effective spark from Voltorb does barely half. Thankfully, Gloom spares Voltorb, meaning we can wash our hands of Mantine early, setting up a Leech Seed on the incoming Pokemon, Fortress, who happens to be a physical wall. Leech Seed believes in equality. Did I mention that he has 5 Pokemon? Voltorb is unlucky twice, and good lord how much did Body Slam do? That's not even stab nor super effective. Oh god, level 31. Yeah, Leech Seed wasn't protecting us from that. But with Fortress on a timer and Gloom down, we should be free. Lastly is Grumpig, level 32. Not really liking the looks of that, to be honest. Grumpig uses Psybeam, and she just snipes Duskull back to the underworld. Oh no. And then Lunatone gets snugged by Fortress's stab super effective pin missiles. Okay, Delcatty, let's see what you can do. Oh, alright, we have to rely on luck. But Grumpig is female, and that means Delcatty has another fangirl. Psybeam one-shots from full health. There's no way Grumpig's that strong. Oh yeah, levels. This stupid pig was just one reason why I struggled so hard to get through this battle. It turns out I got really lucky during my first run. When Waken's Pokemon actually attack the right mons, they can typically get rid of one of my mons before they can even move. Roselia in particular falls to a single one of Mantine's aerial aces, which it didn't use once during the first battle, instead just spamming Supersonic, which kept missing. And as it turns out, Leech Seed was vital as Fortress was just near unkillable, meaning once Roselia went down, the battle was lost. Of course, this wasn't even an answer for the pig. For her, we just needed Lunatone alive. So let's just see how my 8th attempt goes. The first turn was a weird one as we miss Grass Whistle while the opponent Gloom misses Cut, and then the other misses Sleep Powder. Morwal stays winning. The next turn we do land the Grass Whistle, specifically on the female Gloom who knows Sleep Powder, and we just let Morwal pelt away to get rid of her as soon as possible. The other Gloom isn't as much of a concern aside from Giga Drain. Both our Pokemon resist and we aren't damaging it, so we should be fine. However, with one Gloom low, I try and position myself for a double KO. Shadow Wave bringing her low and targeting Shadow Rush into the healthy male one to bring him below half. And he goes for cut, meaning no HP recovered back. Also, I started giving my Pokemon items. Morwal for one has leftovers, recovering back HP every turn. Shadow Wave puts an end to the female Gloom, and with that damage, Shadow Rush ends the male Gloom. This brings out both Mantine and Fortress on the same turn, which is actually a bit of a risky play. Morwal, why? At least it's kind of cancelled out by the leftovers. Now I'm relying on luck here a bit, as I just won one turn where Mantine doesn't use Aerial Ace, and Mantine uses Supersonic, hitting Morwal. Perfect. Now Roselia lands a lead seed on Fortress, guaranteeing us a kill. Eventually. Morwal doesn't even hit itself, landing Shadow Rush on Mantine. It's much less bulky physically. Fortress also opts for Dig, meaning it's just going to waste an extra turn before it can attack, meaning even more lead seed damage. And we can switch Morwal out, who is likely targeting, for Duskull, who will dodge the Dig thanks to Levitate. Mantine still doesn't use Aerial Ace, opting for Bubble Beam on Duskull, meaning we can land a lead seed on him. Roselia, why? Both opposing Pokemon being seeded, with their death imminent, and 5 of my mons still alive and healthy, we're set to win. Vortorb comes out on the Mist Pin Missile as Roselia misses Grass Whistle. The lead seed bringing Mantine below half. I should have just let Vortorb kill, but I misplay a bit here as I wasn't sure if Spark would do it. I use Shadow Panic instead, which misses Fortress but does hit Mantine. Yeah, I should have just taken the kill as Fortress uses a Body Slam which kills from full. What a 12 level gap does. It's a sad day when Fortress outspeeds a Mon whose best stat is its speed. Well, Delcatty survives and that's what's important. I actually do let him pick up the kill this time, but with Grumpig out, I know it's Roselia's turn to fall. Now I just need to hope that Fortress targets Lunatone, which it does. Delcatty does what he does best. Grumpig can't move, and Lunatone's Shadow Wave puts Fortress down, doing some chip to Grumpig as well. Grumpig's all that's left, us still with 3 Pokemon, 2 of whom are still healthy. At this point, we're just firing off a volley of shadow attacks under Shadow Sky. Lunatone, why? And eventually, Grumpig can't hold on any longer, submitting to her fate, refusing to attack. I almost feel bad. Wow, that sure was a hard boss battle. Let's just grab that snag machine and scoot on out. Please. I'm feeling impending doom, just at the thought of having to write the script out for this battle. Believe it or not, I actually skimmed over Waken's battle. I struggled with it a lot more than I made myself out to. Well, I'm pretty sure me taking 8 attempts alluded to that, but still, I had to cut it short to prevent this already mammoth video from being even longer. Because of course, if the grunt himself was a Herculean test of patience, then the big boss man is looking grim. I genuinely don't even know where to begin with this monster. Well, for starters, we're immediately thrust into the battle with no heals and only 2 of our mons alive, so this was an obvious wipe. We'll start fresh. As you could tell, not a free battle. We do indeed have to win this one, so walk all the way back to the hideout, make a save outside the 7th circle of hell, and begin our arduous 6-hour-long journey, solving the enigma that is Gonzap. So let's start off by describing the obvious problems. All of Gonzap's Pokemon are level 30 or above, averaging at 10 levels above our own. Gonzap is also the first boss who uses mostly fully evolved Pokemon, our only saving grace being that thankfully he doesn't have a Leaf Stone for Nuzleaf, preventing us from facing a Shiftry too. Nuzleaf, despite being a 2nd stage Pokemon, has the stats of a 1st stage starter, but that doesn't mean that he's not a threat. I'm not saying that by any means. Representative of most of his Pokemon, Nuzleaf has great coverage, as well as coming packed with a Hyper Beam for whatever godforsaken reason. 150 power normal move. In fact, all of his Pokemon get Hyper Beam except for one. Electrode comes with its own armory of tools to use against us. It is one of the fastest Pokemon, has Electric Stab which very few of our Pokemon resist, the ones that do not really being able to do much in return, for whom it also has Facade, a normal type move to hit with anyway. Obviously, as you could guess, our attacks do barely anything against either of these Pokemon. We're at least doing some decent damage against Nuzleaf thanks to his frail defenses, but in a way it just showcases how futile this battle is, considering that's all we can do despite how frail it is. By the time we take out both Nuzleaf and Electrode, we've already lost 2 of our best Pokemon, with the 2 on the field being in reverse mode, Delcatty on 8 HP and Roselia on 1. And out comes Gonzap's 2nd line of defense. If his 1st line was able to tear through 2/3 of my team, I'm not even sure where to begin with Whiscash and Vileplume. These two Pokemon pretty much cover each other's weaknesses, only very few types being able to resist both of their stabs. And remember, we're working with a very limited roster of Pokemon. Whiscash has some great coverage with Water, Rock and Electric, more than enough to pick off the Pokemon that Nuzleaf and Electrode left on their dying breath. It also somehow outspeeds most of our Pokemon, save for Voltorb, who is literally our fastest Pokemon, the pre-evo of one of the fastest Pokemon. Then we have Vileplume, who rather than focusing on coverage, specializes in being the most annoying Pokemon to be up against in a double battle. Just like Waken's Gloom, he comes with Sleep Powder and Giga Drain. With us not being able to kill Gloom within 2 turns, even doubling into it, there's no shot for Vileplume. This thing can spread sleep as much as it wants. And then there's Giga Drain, which means with its impressive special attack, can do a lot to even Pokemon that resist it, which in turn means that it can restore back the measly damage that we can even do to it. This thing is near unkillable without us putting all of our effort into focusing in on it. Kinda hard to do with Whiscash destroying all of my wall breakers. I mean, just look at how much their stabs do against Voltorb and Duskull from full health. And that's before me even mentioning the fact that they both carry Hyper Beam, essentially a free kill button. Sure, the free turn while they recharge is nice, but it means a lot less during a double battle as the user still has his partner to attack, especially when one turn doesn't even get us anywhere with our pathetic damage output. And I haven't even spoken about how bulky they are. All of these things are the surface level problems that we need to consider. And then we have the second layer. How do these Pokemon relate to the encounters that we have available? Sure, a good grass type would invalidate both Whiscash and Vileplume, but do we have one? No, we have Roselia, who's cosplaying as a grass type, and isn't nearly bulky enough to take advantages of the type resistances. Our strongest Pokemon, Lunatone, is weak to 4 out of the 5 Pokemon stabs. It will basically die in 1 hit. Even Electrode, who's the one not included in that list, has the Dark-type Thief for coverage. Vileplume, who is arguably Gonzap's bulkiest Pokemon with Giga Drain, and in my opinion the most threatening, is a Grass type, meaning it's immune to Roselia's Leech Seed, currently our strongest move, especially against defensive mons. Most of Gonzap's Pokemon use special moves, meaning even Mawil's Intimidate is pretty weak against him. It's not entirely useless as it does weaken Hyper Beam and the odd physical coverage move, but that's us grasping at straws. And to top it off, because why not screw me over in every possible way, 4 out of his 5 Pokemon are either male or genderless, meaning they can't even be affected by Delcatty's Attract Cheese. Literally only Skarmory, the last mon that he sends out, is female. And I'll get to Skarmory. Man, it's like this team was specially built to counter people doing challenges like this. Well, Delcatty's thing is more luck based as gender isn't fixed for a shadow Pokemon, but it's hard to complain considering how much male Delcatty's helped us out, namely against Exol. And the thing is, I really do believe that I'm using the best Pokemon for the job. Sure, we have higher leveled Pokemon, but they're all shit, because the next layer that we need to look out for is what moves they actually get. Most of them have 2 shadow moves, an attacking one and a status move, them relearning 2 moves as their shadow gauge goes down. Seal gets Ice Beam, a strong ice move, super effective against Vileplume. Guess what? Seal isn't even an ice type yet, it's pure water. And regardless, Vileplume will one-shot with Giga Drain anyway. Swinub 2 is an ice type, but also a ground type. That's a field day for both the Plume and Whiscash. Spearow learns Aerial Ace, strong against grass, but would you seriously tell me to use a Spearow? Fucking Togepi, man, why? It's even the first Pokemon to get a new shadow move, Shadow Rave, which causes the target to wake up the next morning with a migraine, a dry mouth, and some suspicious bank transactions. I swear that wasn't me. But we need something that's helpful to us now. In other words, I promise I'm using the best team possible. Just trust me, bro. The long and short of it, we're fucked. I've been showing you a few of my tries at the battle in the background, but let's actually go through a couple of my attempts. I think attempt number 9 is when I really started to get into the swing of things. At this point, I found starting with Roselia and Voltorb was the safest play. Nuzleaf almost always goes for a fake out, but we can't really predict on who. Electrode is also discouraged from using Spark as both resist electric. What happens this turn doesn't really matter too much as long as it's not a crit on our side. Having Roselia doubled into does suck though. Well, Roselia flinches, but that means Voltorb can move to land Shadow Panic on both Pokemon to confuse. Confusing is very important as that means that we have a 50% chance for a free turn, plus some free damage, cause boy we need it. Electrode's a lot more manageable despite its speed. Nuzleaf is a bit more of a wild card with his coverage and Hyper Beam, but even he hits himself, and it really does show you how much confusion recoil damage is worth to us now. Usually it's just some extra chip that's nice to have, the free turn being more important, but now it did just as much, if not more, as a super effective Shadow Rush. We're planning on keeping Electrode around, so it's the perfect mon to set up a lead seed on. Electrode is able to hit the facade this time, doing well over half, but then gets paralyzed by Voltorb's ability. This is actually as close to perfect as these last moves could have gone. Nuzleaf even hits itself. Amazing. Roselia does miss a Grass Whistle though, and it sends him into a rage apparently, and that's fine. The important stuff landed. The Leech Seed also cancels out the recoil. I want to keep Rose for later, so into more while a Shadow Rush still doesn't kill. And then Nuzleaf hits itself for the 3rd time in a row for a self KO. Electrode is able to push past the confusion and paralysis to use Facade, but it was into Mawile. Now Vileplume comes out, and I think it's for the best that we keep him separated from Whiscash. Leftovers plus Leech Seed fully restores Mawile. Now I want to switch back into Roselia as she'll resist Plume's attack, and Voltorb manages to land yet another Shadow Panic, Vileplume hitting itself. This may look like I've been getting incredibly lucky, which I am, but reminder, attempt number 9. Electrode is able to move once again however, finishing Voltorb off, though 1 for 1 isn't too shabby. Most of my Pokemon are pretty healthy too. The next step is getting rid of Vileplume as fast as possible, so into Delcatty, and as it hits itself again, we part away with Shadow Rush. Roselia does miss another Grass Whistle though. Well, while the grass types have been unlucky, it seems Electrode is having the time of its life, breaking through once again to hit Facade, 3 times in a row. That's about a 5% chance. Roselia is able to survive the attack but succumbs to Reverse Mode's recoil. Unfortunately, that means Electrode stays alive 1 turn longer, as Leech Seed doesn't trigger. Poor Vileplume. That side's been really unlucky. We just pelt away with our attacks, Duskull really showing off that that's just not his forte, and Electrode finally can't move due to paralysis. Dude, there's no way I'm getting this lucky again. Shadow Rush just misses the kill, and Electrode snaps out of confusion to use Spark, bringing Delcatty in range of recoil. Duskull's Shadow Wave did indeed make a difference, bringing Vileplume down, or allowed him to stay alive an extra turn depending on your perspective. Whiscash comes out, Delcatty succumbs to the recoil, and Electrode is 1 turn away from death. Alright, didn't want to bring him out this early, but I need Mawile healthy for the next mon, and I believe in Lunatone. She can take an attack. As expected, Whiscash uses a Water Pulse on Lunatone. No, why? It was going so well! Of course, I caught a whiff of victory, only for it to be torn away from me in 1 turn. It would have survived a non-crit, I'm 90% certain. We went from having a 1 Pokemon lead to being on our last 2 mons. Mawile of course getting hit by Spark, doing what looks like 75%, and then paralyzes. It's over. Electrode goes down, bringing out Gonzap's final Pokemon, Skarmory, but Mawile's dying the next turn. And what's Duskull gonna do all by himself? Oh come on, that was so unnecessary and you know it. Well, Duskull manages to confuse both Pokemon, but seeing Duskull get bullied makes me sad, so to save you the suspense, he dies. That was one of, if not my best run. Not even just up to that point, but it was my best for way long after too. The next time I even hit Skarmory was attempt number 14. Voltorb ended up dying early while Vileplume was still out and healthy, but Electrode was in a similar position as before. Except this time, it was also because I was spamming Spark with Voltorb. I was finding some success trying my odds out with Grass Whistle, and found that it made a few parts a lot more consistent, namely keeping more Pokemon alive. Also, I learned that when a Pokemon's asleep, it doesn't eat turns of confusion, so if you confuse them while they're asleep, they'll wake up confused with their counter at 0. While Vileplume was asleep and Electrode was close to death, I decided to lower their attack more so Hyper Beam wouldn't be as threatening. That would mean that Roselia is pretty much safe from Vileplume. It was going fine, but then Whiscash came in and literally turn 1 pressed the kill button. It wasn't a good turn for Vileplume to wake up, but at least it hit itself. And then Delcatty got a crit. Well, I didn't think we were winning that one, but they shut down any hope I had, as while I was on the verge of defeating Whiscash, with 3 of my best mons still alive, getting amazing luck with confusion, Whiscash was just 1 turn away from death, but managed to push past the confusion. That's alright, we can eat 1 more Water Pulse. Unless it crits. Now I'm forced to bring in my still healthy Lunatone while Vileplume hasn't moved yet, for it to snap out of confusion and put my healthy Lunatone to sleep. But that's fine. Whiscash hits itself the next turn, meaning we have a chance, until Vileplume uses Giga Drain, which also crits. Delcatty finishes up with Whiscash and Skarmory comes out, but by that point, literally Delcatty was the only one left, with the Vileplume still being alive, and I didn't even want to entertain the idea that I could win. Well, at least now there's a clear path. Make sure I cripple Electrode as much as possible, then start taking out the Pokemon in the other slot, and just hope for confusion hits. I've also found that it's most definitely worth attempting to put the opposing monster to sleep, even if I might waste a turn missing. I've also been resetting more when the first few turns don't go exactly the way I want. I mean, why even bother letting the rest of the battle play out if I know I'll lose? I can never overstate just how long battles take in these games. And I'm playing on original hardware, so speed up isn't available, and not because my computer screams in pain whenever I run this game above 150% speed. Through the multiple attempts I've been playing, I've also started getting better at predicting the AI, and realized I haven't really been switching much, so I can start incorporating that into the play. On to attempt number 19? I've been pretty much sticking to the Roselia Voltorb combo from the first time. Now if the first 3 turns don't go exactly the way I want, I just immediately reset. I've noticed that Nuzleaf always seems to target Roselia, so I switch her out for Duskull, who's immune. What Electrode does isn't important as long as there's no crit, but all the better if it too fails a move on Duskull. And now I absolutely need Shadow Panic to hit both Pokemon. This is the first real hurdle. The other 2 things happen pretty frequently. Reverse mode, why? Okay, it doesn't matter too much, that's a perfect turn 1. The next turn's a bit more lenient. We want to trade Duskull back for Roselia and Voltorb for Mawile. This gives us the best chance to get hit with a not very effective move if Confusion doesn't work. Of course, we would really like Confusion to work. A Paralysis or crit would be a reset. Electrode hits itself, but Nuzleaf uses a not very effective Hyper Beam on Mawile. Not the move I was expecting, but that's probably close to a perfect turn too. I never even considered the possibility that Nuzleaf would lose a turn entirely. Electrode hits itself again, and Roselia can set up his seed. Of course, we want to get rid of Nuzleaf as soon as possible. God damn, look at that damage from Mawile. Unfortunately, Electrode snaps out pretty quickly, but uses Sonic Boom, which always does 20 points of damage. I think that's better than being hit by a Facade. And Nuzleaf hits itself, with Roselia even landing Grass Whistle on Electrode, and that's a perfect turn 4. This battle's now worth investing time into. Shadow Rush brings Nuzleaf into red. Both of our mons now have a way to passively heal too, meaning we're already close to being healthy. Since I know Nuzleaf's dying this turn, to be completely safe, I switch Roselia back for Duskull, as Nuzleaf uses Feint Attack. On Mawile, I thought I almost messed up for a moment. Nuzleaf has no coverage for Steel, so that's its strongest move. Shadow Rush finishes Nuzleaf off, and out comes Vileplume. Well, there goes Mawile's passive healing. Vileplume moves first using a Giga Drain on Duskull, which is kind of scary, but he survives on 1 HP. He's had a lot of close calls during this challenge. He gets payback with a Confuse Ray. Well, back into Roselia. Electrode is still asleep, and Vileplume even hits itself. Mawile's actually so strong, we've already brought Vileplume below half. I have no clue what sort of foresight I had, but I switched Mawile out for Voltorb just as Electrode woke up. It did use Sonic Boom on Roselia, so it didn't really change anything, but Electrode is the only Pokemon that can do real damage to Mawile without a crit. Whiscash takes 2 to 3 hits depending on leftovers in reverse mode. Roselia lands another Grass Whistle, this time on Vileplume. Unfortunately, we're not quite in range for the double KO, but Vileplume's guaranteed to stay asleep 1 more turn, and Electrode's dying at the end of this one. I decide positioning is more important and switch Roselia out for Duskull. He's immune to Sonic Boom and will also take the HP from Electrode's death, or he can survive on what looks like 1 HP. A bit of a misplay there, but it could actually work out in our favour. Electrode uses Spark on Voltorb for whatever reason, and Duskull was about to die that turn. That paralysis doesn't really change anything now, but Voltorb's been killing it with its ability. Voltorb finishes off his Elder with Shadow Rush. A little bit of karma there, I guess. And as Whiscash comes in, thanks to the Jank Gen 3 double battle mechanics, which have done nothing but screw me over all this time, we can confuse with Duskull's Confuse Ray instantly. Now we should be perfectly safe to bring out Roselia in Duskull's place. And I even bring in Lunatone in Voltorb's slot, cause I'm feeling a little wacky. Whiscash pushes through Confusion to use a Water Pulse on Roselia, but it confuses us. Okay, that complicates things a little, but they're equally at a disadvantage, so we may as well stay in. As Whiscash once again pushes past Confusion to hit the kill button. And goodbye Roselia. Did great this run. Well, it's not all bad. Now we have a free turn on Whiscash. I bring Duskull back in, and Lunatone outspeeds Vileplume to use Shadow Wave. That's great info. Vileplume stays asleep, so that means we're guaranteed the kill, as Whiscash can't move. Not only that, but Jank Double's mechanics means that the incoming Skarmory also gets confused by Duskull's Confuse Ray. It's all coming together now. This is what all my suffering's been building up to. Still best not to speak too soon, a lot could still go wrong, and Skarmory is also a strong Pokemon while being a physical wall. Now's the time to abuse Mawil's ability, and why I've been reserving my use of him. Skarmory is completely walled by steel types. Whiscash could still be an issue, but at least we can focus in on one Pokemon now. And then they both hit themselves. Lunatone's Shadow Wave does a lot. I've only just noticed. Unfortunately, both of our Pokemon are also taking recall damage each turn, so it's a war of attrition. Skarmory hits itself again, but Whiscash isn't having it. He snipes Mawile with Water Pulse, doing enough to put him down. That did way more than I was expecting, but honestly, better him than Luna. She's still doing a lot of damage each turn. Shadow Wave is still whistling away at both of them, but we need a couple of more turns. And both of them hit themselves again. Shadow Wave brings both mons low, with Voltorb electrocuting Skarmory, leaving Whiscash all by his lonesome on a sliver of HP. Am I allowed to be hopeful here? Does Whiscash finally feel dread after critting my Pokemon god knows how many times? Whiscash snaps out of confusion for his last ditch effort. A super effective Water Pulse picking up the kill on Luna, but Paralysis has not slowed down Voltorb one bit. A super effective Shadow Rush ends Whiscash. And the Nuzlocke. Oh my fucking god, I actually got through this battle. I was genuinely starting to believe that it was impossible, and I was considering allowing myself to use items just this one time. But nope, I'm just that good. That required so much planning and with little room for error, and everything still could go wrong if you just got one turn of bad luck. I've seen just about every situation unfold during my time in this battle, and I actually feel like I learned quite a lot with how the AI behaves during doubles. Thanks to harder ROM hacks, people have a pretty good understanding of how Gen 3 AI works in singles, but doubles is always unpredictable. Wow, quite the victory speech I'm having for a battle that only took 2 more attempts than the great Exol. Well, I lied. This is just when I got tired of manually updating the counter every loss. The real number of attempts this battle took is 35, bringing my total resets all the way up to 63. And if I haven't stressed this enough, battles take a long time in this game. I am a walking skeleton. Well, to be fair, the number is slightly inflated due to me resetting if the first 3 turns weren't perfect. But man, that's a lot of time I spent doing one battle in a stupid challenge I'll never think about again. I need rest. Anyway, Gonzap finally believes that we can eat a bowl of nails for breakfast without any milk and gives us our snack machine back. And just moving around in the world again felt so alien after I've been staring at the battle UI for so long. Oh, also we pick up another reset as for some reason I thought the grunts would be friendlier after I humiliated their boss. They were not, and my Pokemon weren't healed. But with that, we can head back to the factory, and finally, some good fucking Shadow Pokemon. After selling all of my earthly belongings short of my body, I get stocked up on every kind of useful ball in the game. That's all the preparation that we need to take on the factory. Back at the entrance, Zook challenges us to another battle despite saying he would never fight me again. Well, this battle is more or less exactly the same as last time, except for one major change. We can finally catch ourselves a Shadow Pokemon. And not just any Shadow Pokemon, a good Shadow Pokemon with a decent level. Trust me, I'm still in shock. Zangoose is a solid Pokemon with great attack, a good speed tier, and even gets Shadow Rush. It does take its sweet time getting in the ball though. They can just keep doing that? What's stopping us? The moral code? We're already stealing Pokemon, surely putting the enemy to sleep shouldn't be crossing any line. Well, I think this place is usually supposed to be one of the harder dungeons in the game, but after what we've just gone through, this is a Black Friday sale for us. New Shadow Pokemon down every corridor, in every room, at the base of every flight of stairs, even inside the walls. Cypher's also starting to run 2-for-1 deals now, with more and more grunts having 2 Shadow Pokemon on their teams. Not gonna lie, after all that time without a new Shadow Pokemon, the early ones were a bit disappointing. A lot of these Pokemon are still running Shadow Blitz, the weakest Shadow move, Paris. I even accidentally killed a Pidgeotto, which, truth be told, I don't think anyone's gonna miss. Well, we do need to round up all the Shadow Pokemon at some point, so this kind of makes one pass a little tedious, but I don't remember the last time I saved. So goodbye Pidgeotto. However, upon getting closer to the apex, we start getting some good encounters, and two amazing ones. Tangela has a surprisingly high special attack and even gets Shadow Rave, which is basically an upgrade from Shadow Wave, like Shadow Rush is to Shadow Blitz. We get a Magneton, whose special attack tops even Tangela, again with Shadow Rave, and also Shadow Sky, and it's finally another Steel type, which is easily the best defensive typing in the game. Morwell's starting to suffer a bit, so having a spare is always helpful. And it even gets Stab Thunder, a 120 base power electric move, with an accuracy of 70%. But honestly, considering this is not a Nuzlocke, this isn't the biggest setback. But they're not even the best ones. The single best Pokemon that we can catch in this factory is none other than our pal Butterfree. Now attacking wise, Butterfree is absolutely useless. But as you've seen with the previous battles that we struggled with, support moves are what shine the brightest, and Butterfree gets an amazing one. After reducing her shadow gauge a bit, she relearns the move Sleep Powder, a move we're now very familiar with. It has a 75% chance to put the opponent to sleep. However, Butterfree has a special ability called Compound Eyes, which increases the accuracy of moves by 30%, turning Sleep Powder from a 75% accurate one to a 97.5 accurate move. That is insanely broken for a move that puts Pokemon to sleep, especially in this generation. We've already had a taste for how useful sleep can be with Roselia's Grass Whistle, but we were relying on an accuracy of 55%. Imagine if that move was basically guaranteed to hit the target every time. And this isn't just useful to put Shadow Pokemon to sleep, making them easier to catch, but also in regular battles where we can invalidate the opponent from attacking for 2 to 5 turns. The biggest downside is honestly just keeping Butterfree alive long enough to use it. She even gets a new move called Shadow Mist, which reduces the evasion of both opponents by 2 stages. I can see her pairing up really well with Magneton. And lastly, the next Pokemon of note isn't as impressive as Butterfree, but it's amazing nonetheless. Arbok, and it's literally only for 2 reasons. One, it too has the ability Intimidate, which in this game shoots its value through the roof. And 2, it also has a new Shadow move, Shadow Half, a move which halves the HP of every Pokemon on the field, including itself and allies. This is a pretty risky move to use, especially since it has a recharge period like Hyper Beam, but you know all those bulky Pokemon that we've had, imagine just doing half to both Pokemon in 1 turn. That's not even its only utility, it's great for catching Shadow Pokemon too. Reducing HP is quite difficult as our shadow moves are of course not very effective, and it's rare for a Pokemon to get good attacking moves from its learn pool. And while not being great offensively, it can at least hold its own better than Butterfree, who for some reason only learns physical moves despite being a special attacker. I think we deserve this. It's time. We've stormed the factory, caught every shadow Pokemon in sight, that one doesn't count, and all who's left is the admin. But before we move on, I think it's time to say a few goodbyes. I don't usually do this, but they've been with us for the past hour, with me a lot longer. The whole motivation behind getting here was to eventually replace them, but I wasn't expecting to get so attached. I guess that kind of just happens when you're forced to stare at them for about 20 hours straight. Voltorb had a shaky start, missing every Shadow Panic we try to use against Snattle, to then being crucial to taking Gonzap down. Landing every Shadow Panic in the winning battle, even landing the final attack. Duskull was just a goofy little guy. I didn't have any expectations, but he was surprisingly bulky, being able to spread always accurate Confuse Rays, and his ghost immunities were vital, especially in the Gonzap battle. Roselia had me concerned when I saw no grass moves, but Leech Seed was invaluable. I complained at first, but that move has easily done more damage than any of my Pokemon have done individually, while also keeping the team healthy. And even Grass Whistle didn't end up being the wasted move slot I thought it would be. And finally, we have Delcatty. Delcatty, you and I have a history, not a good one, and yet you're the one who's lasted the longest on the team. Not out of spite, but by actually being useful. I may have not spoken about our minor battles, but for the longest time, Delcatty was one of our hardest hitters, with both Shadow Rush and Shadow Wave. However, I'd go as far as to say that he saved the run thanks to one move. A track made so many impossible battles so much easier. I stand by everything I said about you, but I'll admit, you're the one I'm saddest to leave behind. Time for us to use some actually decent Pokemon for a change. See ya, losers. Morwhile and Lunatone will continue with us a bit longer, but only to send off the new generation. Next up is the final admin battle, the head engineer of this factory, Gorgon, and along with this factory, we're about to destroy this man's career. Gorgon leads with Lairon and Celio, and I trial out my new power couple. Lairon protects on the first turn, which is fine as we were trying to put it to sleep anyway, and Magneton lands his first Thunder, already picking up the one-shot on Celio. God, that feels so liberating. I haven't mentioned this, but Magneton's been crazy with Thunder. I think he's only missed like once during the 10 times I've used it so far. Next up is Slowking, another victim for the malicious magnets. He doesn't miss. But Slowking is much bulkier, so she tanks, but gets paralyzed. I know Magneton's trying to help, but we would really prefer putting it to sleep. Well, we targeted Lairon this turn anyway. We're just taking an entire turn away from the admin. Are we allowed to be on this side of the battle for a change? And Slowking uses an Earthquake, 4 times effective on both Lairon and Magneton, but unfortunately we're frailer. Magneton's already proven his worth. Well, Butterfree's got nothing to do now, so she may as well attack. Good job, Butterfree. Shadow Wave from Lunatone picks up the kill on Slowking and brings Lairon closer to death. Earthring's yet another Slowmon that we can outspeed to put to sleep before it can move. Shadow Wave cops another kill. And we're already on the first of the 2 Shadow Pokemon. Primeape, if I'm being honest, isn't too helpful to us. I'll still try and catch it anyway, but I mention this because it has an ability that prevents it from being put to sleep, which might make catching it difficult. Lunatone's not doing much against Ursaring, so I switch her out for Zangoose, who immediately misses Crush Claw. Not a great start. I should have shown off Arbok, but I forgot to add it to the party, so we reduced Primeape's HP down the old-fashioned way. For the record, Crush Claw does a lot more than a super effective Shadow Rush with Zangoose's item, which boosts normal moves by 20%, and it also has a 50% chance to lower the target's defense. Thankfully, we don't really have to worry about the Shadow Pokemon, as Primeape attacks my frailest Pokemon, barely scratching her. I use Aerial Ace one more time. Oh. Well, I don't remember the last time I saved, and like I said, we'll move on. I'll wrangle him up back later. And the last Pokemon is Shadow Hypno. It's fine. It has 2 really good Shadow moves, but its attacking capabilities are lacking. Shadow Storm is the strongest of the non-signature special Shadow moves, and she also gets Shadow Down, which lowers both of the opponent's defenses by 2 stages. I really wish these interesting Shadow status moves were introduced a lot sooner, rather than the tail end of the game. Zangoose misses again. Butterfree! I'm sorry I said you weren't much of an attacker, please, I'd like you just the way you are. Lunatone can come out to clean up. I mean, she's all by herself now, so I guess I may as well catch her. Wow, it feels good to actually have the option to be picky for a change. Hypno, I swear to God, you're no more Morwhile. Test my patience and you die. Good. And that's Gorgon. Maybe I just remember this part being harder. Or maybe the past half of this game has completely skewed my perception of the game's difficulty. What? No way. You know, I really do like this game. Way better than Colosseum. And I objectively know that this is a better game with a better story. But I feel like Colosseum had more charm, you know? Maybe it's literally just the character designs influencing me. But they also introduced new places like Pyrite Town and the Under, which they removed from this game for some reason. I haven't really felt the same impact from any of the new places in this game. I mean, the Shadow Factory is definitely cool, and I like the SS Libra, but I can't quite explain it. But with us destroying the Shadow Pokemon Factory, preventing anyone else from getting their hands on my lovely little abominations, there is one final location that we need to bring the fight to. And despite what I literally just said, this is actually my favorite location in the GameCube games, the Cypher headquarters. Well, getting there is easier said than done, as apparently the weather conditions make it difficult for regular ships to pass through, let alone dock. However, true friendship is not something easily misplaced. When Chobro refused to hook us up with a new bike, I was honestly really disappointed. I came close to burning all of his pictures that I've hung up in my room, but I could never bring myself to do that to my little chop. All this time, he was working on an innovation worthy only of his best friend, me. Equal to his mighty Robo-Groudon, he built us a Robo-Kyogre, a submarine which could easily clear the storm shielding the island. And you know what? I think that's a suitable replacement for the bike that we lost. If only we could ride it to more locations. So embarking on our brand new Robo Kyogre, we brave the seas, onwards to the new world to take on Cypher so that we're the only ones in command of Shadow Pokemon. The final zone of the game, Citadark Island. Whenever I think about the GameCube games, the most nostalgia I feel is actually for Citadark Island and the whole final act. Not because anything mind-shattering happens, but I just think it's such a well-designed Pokemon dungeon, with you constantly moving through different parts of the base so it never feels too samey. Despite being on the same island, it feels like we're going through different locations every other screen. Well, that's one part of it at least. There's a more likely explanation. You might remember that I mentioned that Gale of Darkness has twice the amount of Shadow Pokemon than Colosseum. But if we save, we can see that we've caught about 40, which is on par with the Colosseum. So where are the other half? In the post-game? Well, that's true for one Pokemon. The remaining ones, however, half of the Shadow Decks, are scattered throughout this final island. Because while I said that this is the final section, playtime-wise, this section makes up for about 30% of the entire game. So I probably have so much nostalgia for this place simply because of how long I've spent here. Probably longer than any other location in the GameCube games. The music is ingrained in my mind. Aside from Mountain Battle, if you play through that, you'd know. Not that I'm complaining, I really do love this area. Most Force Trainer battles now all have Shadow Pokemon. As such, from here on out, we'll be replacing our team on a regular basis, since we'll be catching Pokemon that'll probably outclass the ones that we caught 20 minutes prior. No more making the mistake of getting attached to my Shadow Pokemon, except you two, you're both lovely and I'll miss you very much more while in Lunatone. Of course, this video is already so long, so I most definitely won't be simulating how long it takes, aside from talking about a location here or there. But yeah, there are a lot of trainer battles, including rebattles with the admins and even 2 new ones. The first of which being Lavrina. Lavrina leads with Gardevoir and Gorbis, and ever since the success of the Gargan battle, I've been maining the Butterfree Magneton lead. A not very effective Psychic still does over half, and Magneton has yet to disappoint me. Thunder gets the one-shot. Butterfree puts Gardevoir to sleep, and out comes Roselia. Don't use my strats against me. Magneton sets up a Shadow Sky, and we also put Roselia to sleep. I love this Pokemon. Magneton's taking a lot of chip from the seed and reverse mode. Both mons wake up and she actually is using my strat. Shadow Rage still doesn't get the kill and Roselia sets up another Leech Seed. Butterfree is already cementing herself as one of my favorites, pushing past the infatuation to pick up a kill with Aerial Ace. Poor Lavrina stuck with a Shadow Farfetch'd. Even one of her grunts had a Shadow Dodrio who outclasses it in every way. Shadow Sky finishes Gardevoir off and Leech Seed Magneton. Well, I guess we can now show off Arbok, as Lavrina pulls out Shadow Altaria. We can now use the Shadow Half to cut everyone's HP by half. And with Butterfree putting Altaria to sleep, catching her is so much easier. She did get confused by Shadow Panic, so switch out to Zangoose while Arbok recharges. Thankfully, her Shadow Pokemon can't really do anything to us, so throwing balls is free. We catch Altaria in the first Great Ball. Farfetch was a bit offended at me speaking the truth, so he's a bit more rebellious. Maybe it had something to do with me refusing to give him anything but the regular Pokeball. But beggars can't be choosers. And that's Lavrina. Nice and easy, I could get used to this. Well, Lavrina will actually be the last admin that will fight for a while. I'm honestly surprised she showed up this early. Literally the first room after entering the island. We have a bit of a stroll before anything interesting happens, but these whirlpool machines are pretty cool. We have a stroll alongside a river of lava and play God with these cube things. Surely that floor is still scorching hot. Well, after solving the puzzle, we get ambushed by a commander near the entrance. He used a sun team with mostly fire types, and he absolutely bodied me on the first try. We weren't really prepared for fire types. Houndoom and Ninetales swept half of my team with Flamethrower, with Varply making a return with Giga Drain for the rest. We did get his last 2 mons, both being Shadow Pokemon, Pinsir and Magmar. I wanted both of them, but at this point we were on our last 2 Pokemon, and with them being stubborn getting into the ball, they managed to whittle me down. Next attempt went a lot better, but we still only had 3 Pokemon for the Shadows, though one of them was Butterfree, who could put Pinsir to sleep, making that one much easier to catch at least. I never realized how great netballs were, basically a 3x multiplier for water and bug Pokemon. Magmar was harder to catch, especially with Shadow Rave chipping both of my mons at the same time, but he does eventually accept my Great Balls. This battle was important as both Magmar and Pinsir will be mainstays on my team for a sizable portion, and it was surprisingly tough with all of his mons out-leveling our own, and even the admin that we just fought. Maybe this is where we start seeing the Pokémon Colosseum level curve. Magmar funnily enough gets no Fire Stab, instead getting Thunder Punch, but it does get both Shadow Rave and Shadow Rush, having pretty decent physical and special attack. Pinsir on the other hand has great attack and gets Shadow Break, the strongest of the physical shadow moves. Well, there's one that's stronger, but the downsides make it not worth it. I shall take those two, thank you very much. Golduck has done nothing all this time, and Hypno just makes me feel uncomfortable. The Magmar and Pinsir team have taken up the lead slots of my Pokemon. They just work very well together and get off a high volume of damage every turn. Butterfree and Magneton haven't fallen off, but they're better saved for catching Pokemon. Speaking of catching Pokemon, while going through the dungeon, I've been using this long walk as an opportunity to round up the Pokemon that I've lost during the journey. After our first interaction with Mirror B, we get a radar that tells us his whereabouts if he's at a Colosseum or a Pokespot. Battling him, he will always have a Shadow Pokemon that ran away during their first encounter. We only need to catch 3, but ideally I want to do that before the final battle. Even random grunts are starting to hold 5 mons now, even when they have no Shadow Pokemon. The next important Shadow Pokemon that we want to catch is from this duo who fight us back to back. We got through the first guy's Pokemon pretty easily, but Hitmonchan refused to stay in the ball. By the time that we finally caught him, my team was in rough shape, and we don't get a chance to heal before the next battle. And he had 5 Pokemon, so that was a wipe. Thankfully, we were not forced to fight the other guy again, so with my mons healthy, he was a lot easier the second time. And then we can use the Shadow Half into a sleep powder to make catching Hitmonlee a lot easier, this time with only 1 mon down. Hitmonlee hits hard, is in a pretty good speed tier, has a good level, and also comes pre-packed with both Shadow Down, the move that lowers both targets' defense by 2 stages, and Shadow Half. It was easily a must-have. Remember that guy who had Magmar and Pinsir, and how I said that he was out-leveling us? Well, his levels were around 37. This grunts are in the 40s. Man, I really miss the true-to-life scaled Pokemon. Look at the boy. Also level 44. What? This is literally the same trainer I was just talking about. We did take a detour to grab an optional item, so maybe this was on purpose. I keep saying this, but they did a really good job making each area feel different. Like in a regular Pokemon game, this could have just been the same office building everywhere, but each long interior section has a different gimmick or a set piece. And even the floor above us is different, with a puzzle of sorts that connects with the crane room below. Well, maybe not a puzzle, just drop down in the right hole. And going up the lift, we're already outside the main structure. I sped run that because I really don't want to make this video even longer, but that was about 5 hours, and I only made 1 detour. Well, going up was a bit of a mistake as we're immediately thrown into a battle with the second admin, Snattle. I did not heal before this battle, and 3 of my Pokemon were dead. This attempt did not go well. On to the next. Snattle still hasn't evolved as Metang, and thankfully has kept the Quag. Unfortunately, Butterfree and Magneton's levels are starting to suffer, so I swapped out the Magnus for a horse 10 levels above, and Butterfree can stay a bit longer. Rapidash is fast, has Shadow Sky, and also has Shadow Down, halving the defense of Quag. Meaning Pinsir's Shadow Break does double the damage. Quag is a bulky boy though. Metang's ability resisted it. Both mons double into Rapidash, bringing him into the red. I let Pinsir now do some chip to Metang, and Rapidash still outspeeds the Cerberus Shadow Sky. Psychic finishes him off, which means Hitmonlee also needs to take a waterfall on the switch in. Since Hitmonlee only has Shadow Rush, I let him finish off Quagsire. That crit was unnecessary. And Pinsir uses the Shadow Sky boosted Shadow Break, which also crits, picking up the kill. Snattle brings out Sizzle and a Shadow Soul Rock. Very fitting. Well, I don't think it will be as useful as the other Celestial counterpart, considering we already have good Pokemon now. Shadow Rave does a pitiful amount. Hitmonlee can pull off the same strat as Rapidash, using Shadow Down to halve both of their defenses. Pinsir uses a Shadow Break on Sizzle, who surprisingly falls in 1 shot. Considering Quagsire survived, I thought Sizzle with his high defenses would too. Quag's just built different. Snattle still has his little pal. Did he not just see what it did to Sizzle? And his final Shadow Pokemon is Big Man. We need him. That's a must catch. Don't know what his moves are, but he's a necessary addition. Well, neither of them can really do anything to us anymore, so we just spend the next 5 minutes spamming balls. And we've got 2 new Shadow Pokemon. I just realized that random grunt with a Wailord and Crobat even out-leveled Snattle. Was it actually on purpose? Standing menacingly on the opposite side is the first of the 2 new admins, and he's also the one that prevented me from getting my Zangoose early. It's about time that he gets his ass beat. He already leads with a Shadow Pokemon, Swallow, and Alakazam, who we saw at the start of the game. Alright, levels are starting to look pretty scary now, but at least his Shadow Pokemon's levels are close to his regular Pokemon. Swallow is super speedy, so it sets up a Shadow Sky, which only benefits us, but that means I wasted a turn with Rapidash. Psychic does a lot. And the Shadow Sky boosted Shadow Break gets the one-shot on the frail Alakazam. Next is Kingdra. Swallow could have easily finished off Rapidash, but we get spared, allowing him to use a Shadow Down. But then even Kingdra doubles into Pinsir, taking him down with a Hydro Pump. So no attack this turn. Swallow doesn't allow Rapidash another free turn, and Dragon Breath does a lot to the incoming Arbok. A Shadow Rush from Pinsir picks up the kill on Kingdra. Heracross comes out, and apparently it's the speedy one, as it uses a double edge on Arbok, finishing him off. So by the time that he brings out the second Shadow Pokemon, Electabuzz, we're only left with 3 Pokemon, all in rough shape. And yeah, with the Shadow Sky boost and reverse mode, they're able to make quick work of my remaining team. And that's a wipe. The second attempt goes even worse, as apparently Alakazam had Fire Punch, which it uses turn 1 to one-shot Pinsir. And then a turn later, Swallow burns itself on Magmar's Flame Body, which not only puts it on a timer, but also boosts its attack by 50% with its ability Guts. Everything just went so wrong, so that was an instant restart. This time I don't lead with Pinsir, and this battle goes a lot smoother. Swallow sets up the sky, Alakazam targets Magmar, who survives. Shadow down into Shadow Rush, Alakazam down. Swallow gets a crit on Rapidash, but he survives, so we stick to down strat. And Magmar's able to outspeed using Shadow Rush, but it wasn't quite enough to get the kill. Dragon Breath ends Magmar, but that means Shadow Rave can finish Kingdra off, and we get a free hit on Heracross. Shadow Break doing well over half. The recoil was too much for Rapidash, but we can bring out Arbok for the attack drop, who both Pokemon double into. Pinsir finishes off what she started. We're back onto Electabuzz, again with only 3 Pokemon, but all healthy this time. I was about to use Shadow Half, but then realized a better strategy. Using Shadow Down, now Force Swipe from Pinsir will do double the damage, and it will never kill. Swallow gets in the first ball, but Ardos is the first person with 3 Shadow Pokemon, the third being Snorlax. Now remember how I mentioned there was a stronger physical Shadow move? Well, it's the only one Snorlax knows. Electabuzz uses a Shadow Mist, lowering our evasion, and Snorlax uses Shadow End, a 120 base power move with 60% accuracy, and does 50% in recoil damage. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Down to the Gen 1 bugs. Electabuzz doesn't really want us dodging the Shadow End, but Butterfree puts Snorlax to sleep before she can move. And at this point, we've won. Just a matter of spamming balls until both mons stay in. Snorlax could be a bit of a pain with its low catch rate, but then it gets in the second ball, and Electabuzz gets in the next. Ardos down. Honestly, if we just stuck to killing Shadow Pokemon, this would be so much easier. But I'm catching them for a good cause. Promise. Snorlax is kind of bad without any other moves. Electabuzz is honestly a better Magmar with its higher level, and Swallow has an amazing moveset. I swap out Arbok and Rapidash for Electabuzz and Swallow. We enter the main building, but Greevil puts up a window between us. Well, guess there's no way around this. No, breaking it would just be rude. Well, Gorgon wasn't too happy with us destroying his factory, so if he can't have one, neither can Greevil. He leads with an Ursaring and Slowking, and I test out our new toys, Swallow and Electabuzz. Ursaring protects turn 1, and we set up a Shadow Sky. Luckily we targeted Slowking, but Shadow Break doesn't get the kill. Slowking uses Earthquake, which only hits Electabuzz, but we survive. Now Swallow can target Slowking to finish him off, but Electabuzz still can't get the kill on Ursaring. Him using a Slash in return for the KO. He does get paralyzed by Static though. Aggron's out, so I bring out Butterfree for our tried and tested strategy. Swallow finishes Ursaring off, and we put Aggron to sleep. Or it somehow outspeeds and hits a strong Iron Tail, lowering Swallow's defense. Sleep. Walreign's on the field, and I don't think Butterfree's gonna survive, so into Pinsir, as I actually decided to use Shadow Halve, and I need a sack. It doesn't need to be just for catching Pokemon, it works well on bulky mons too, and Swallow's already low. Walreign did target Butterfree, so sorry Pinsir. Now I can bring out Hitmonlee, and as Swallow recharges, he can finish Walreign off. Or not. Ice Beam puts an end to Swallow. At least Aggron still stays asleep, and then Shadow Sky ends, meaning Walreign stays alive for one more turn. While Magmar can use the Shadow Rave to pick up the kill, doing some damage to Aggron too. And Hitmonlee doubles in to finish the job. Magmar's surprisingly speedy, but what 2 Shadow Pokemon does Gorgon have for us? Poliwrath and Mr. Mime. Alright, not his best work. Poliwrath's surprisingly bulky and comes with a solid moveset, even getting Stab. Mr. Mime... So thanks to Gorgon's Sabotage, we can enter the building without having to make any extra work for the janitor. And waiting on the other side is the second of the 2 new admins, Eldest. Eldest leads with Ninjask and Manectric, and Manectric is a Shadow Pokemon. This makes the whole battle so much easier as we only need to focus on one side. Well, Ninjask protects itself and Manectric sets up Shadow Sky, so that was a wasted turn. And then Ninjask digs a hole so we both miss. After taking the dig, we can finally land an attack, Swallow one-shotting Ninjask. And Eldest sends out Salamence, another Shadow Pokemon. Well, Manectric also has Shadow End, taking the recall, so we need to catch him pretty fast. He doesn't get in the first one, but goes for a Shadow Mist instead. Swallow uses Shadow Half. Manectric does get in the second one however, and the next is Flygon. We double in on him, but we still can't get the kill. Salamence smacks Swallow out of the sky, and then Flygon does over half to the incoming pincer. Salamence somehow gets into the first ball, meaning Electabuzz stays alive to take care of Flygon. And next up are Lapras and Marowak, both of which being Shadow Pokemon. 4 Shadow Pokemon on one team. This is usually one of the harder battles in the game, but we're on the last 2 mons with 5 of ours alive. Lapras was an easy catch thanks to netballs, but Marowak almost gave me a scare using Shadow End twice. But it turns out Shadow End only does half of its current HP, so we put him to sleep and catch our final Shadow Pokemon before the final boss. 2 hours in, and we're only just nearing the end. But we are indeed at the end. And after completely random battles blindsiding me, being stuck on a single battle longer than I ever have in any of my other challenges, and even getting attached to mons I have despised for the last 20 years. What can the final boss in this game do to surprise me? Going up the final elevator, we're brought to the observatory deck, Greevil floating menacingly, alone in an empty room. The back panels open up, allowing Shadow Lugia from the start of the game to descend onto the platform, throwing us into a battle. For this first phase, all we need to do is battle Shadow Lugia all by itself. Since it's a Shadow Pokemon, it can only use Shadow moves, so despite the level difference and the legendary stats, we can keep it in control fairly easily. Thanks for confirming that this is indeed a Shadow Pokemon. I lead with Swallow and Butterfree so we can instantly start off with Shadow Half, halving its HP. Lugia uses its signature Shadow move, Shadow Blast. Oh god, that's all it does. Yeah, this battle's really not a challenge at all. We could use our Master Ball here, but it really can't do anything to us. So we put it to sleep and catch it the old-fashioned way. Both of my Pokemon being in reverse mode is kind of annoying though. Well, it doesn't get caught during the first sleep phase, but I keep spamming Sleep Powder with Butterfree in the background, so we can put it back to sleep on the same turn. Okay, maybe it had something to do with me refusing to use my Ultra Balls. But eventually, it does indeed get into my Great Ball. And that's the battle. Kinda underwhelming, but I'm glad it's an easy win. Oh, nope, of course not. I don't know why, but I really appreciate Fall being his only line before he starts the battle. His grunts and admins unable to stop us, he resorts on using exactly what brought us here, the only tactic he can rely on. A full team of Shadow Pokemon of his own, now even including the legendary birds. Oh, Pokemon don't get healed. That's kind of concerning as we lost Swallow during our last battle and Shadow Half would have been great here, and Butterfree is on the verge of death. Now with all of them being Shadow Pokemon, obviously that kind of makes things a bit easy for us. But remember, we want every Shadow Pokemon, and that includes his own. That means we aren't looking to beat all his Pokemon, we need to spend the time catching them, which means needing to survive an onslaught of attacks without being able to heal. Snorlax wasn't supposed to be out this early, as I was expecting a full heal, so I switch out for Electabuzz, who's already taken some damage. Moltres uses its signature move, Shadow Fire, which is a special shadow move that targets one Pokemon, and also has a chance to burn. It isn't actually a fire type or anything. In fact, it's actually weaker than Shadow Storm, which is the best special shadow move that regular Pokemon can get. Butterfree gets spared this turn as Rhydon traps us with Shadow Hold, so we put Moltres to bed. Electabuzz 2 has Shadow Half, and this is the perfect time to use it, as both of our mons are low anyway. Unfortunately, despite having 1 HP, Rhydon uses its strongest shadow move, putting Butterfree down. Losing her this early is rough, but Rhydon takes even more recoil. Now we can bring in Big Man. Contrary to his last roll sweeping through the entire Elite Four, this time his main job is to survive. Being one of the only Shadow Pokemon that get a recovery move, Burn still doesn't quite finish Electabuzz off. We throw our first ball of the match. And Moltres gets in the Ultra Ball. First try. Rhydon targets Starmie this time, which does less than half, and Electabuzz succumbs to his burns. We're already down to our last 3 Pokemon. Next I bring in Hitmonlee, throw our second ball. And even Rhydon stays in the first try. Now we've got Tauros and Exeggutor on the field. Exeggutor is actually kind of scary, having Shadow End and Shadow Storm, the best moves for physical and special, but Tauros is kind of goofy. Its only attacking move is Shadow Rush, the second tier for physical moves, that only has a base power of 55. This is the final battle. Starmie recovers back the damage he took. but we do need to be mindful of Recover's PP. I throw a ball just for the sake of it. Starmie doesn't really have anything to do. And Exeggutor gets in the first ball. What's happening? I haven't been mentioning it because it's kind of hard to make interesting in the video, but I've been struggling hard catching Shadow Pokemon with the last few bosses. But that's perfect since as Shadow Articuno comes out, Hitmonlee uses a Shadow Halve, halving both Articuno and Taurus's HP. Tauros sets up a Shadow Sky, however, which while not usually detrimental to us, could be a bit annoying, as we're not the ones on the offensive this time. Having Starmie take half the damage doesn't matter as long as he doesn't get doubled into, as he can just recover back any HP he loses, and also has leftovers for passive health. Tauros traps us and Articuno uses Shadow Chill, the same as Shadow Fire but with a chance to freeze instead. And now our target's Articuno. But for the first time, it breaks out of the ball. Wow, Tauros is pathetic. Since we can't put them to sleep, I was trying to use another Shadow Half, but Articuno snipes Hitmonlee out of existence. Snorlax comes back out, us on our last two Pokemon. There really isn't much that we can do at this point. Shadow moves won't do too much, and regular moves might be risky. So one more ball. And Articuno gets in. Seriously, I'm just as confused. Maybe they have a better catch rate in this game? And lastly it's Zapdos, who is the only one with full health. Well, what do you think we've been saving this bad boy for? And finally it's Tauros. Poor Tauros. Even Snorlax can use Curse, boosting her defense, letting her tank Shadow Rushes even better. We throw an Ultra Ball. And yup, even Tauros knew when to give up. 7 balls. It took me 7 balls to catch all of his Pokemon. 6 Ultra Balls. I've been using Great Balls all this time throughout Citadark Island, specifically so I would have a healthy stockpile for Greevil, and I used 6 of them. Do you know how much more difficult I made this entire section for myself because I refused to catch Shadow Pokemon using my Ultra Balls? I have over 100 of them. Greevil doesn't take too kindly for us being the new heir to the Shadow Pokemon project, threatening to blow up the entire island so that we don't get his research materials. Has the mainline series ever had a villain that outright threatened to kill you? Maybe Getz's? Game was ahead of its time. Well, the redhead has our back, knowing that there's only one person who truly knows how to wield Shadow Pokemon. For whatever reason, when elders called him father, I automatically assumed, and for the longest time thought, that all the admins were his children. About that, elders. And that's the end of the game. The dark clouds hanging over Citadark disperse as we ride Robo-Kyogre back to civilization. A montage of all the people of Ore cheering for our victory. How did they even know what was going on the entire time? No one even acknowledged me outside of a few characters throughout the game. So while Greevil's usually a pretty cool boss fight, him using 3 legendaries at the same time, with Shadow Pokemon it was kind of lame. I mean, he did come close to taking out my entire team, but that's because we were already damaged and we could have just redone the battle at full health the next attempt anyway. He ended up being pretty weak, and that works out for us. As truth be told, I don't want to end the GameCube game series, I guess it's a series, on a boss like that. I have too much love and respect for these games. Who cares about Greevil? I only recognize one person of having paramount importance to give us the closure that we need. The true final boss of the entire game. Throughout the game, we've been making it a point to try and catch every Shadow Pokemon, including ones that we had no intention of using. The only ones I had to let go being the ones that are lost to bad luck, rather than me intentionally killing them. But why? That just made the game harder for me. Well, back at the Shadow Pokemon factory, after shutting it down, the workers at the entrance mentioned some strange men coming in to steal the final, strongest Shadow Pokemon. That Shadow Pokemon knew that there was only one person worthy of wielding him. And once we have every Shadow Pokemon, this person comes out of hiding. But where do we even begin looking for him? We visit the fortune teller back in Pyrite, who mentions an immense round thing at the top of a lighthouse. And even she recognizes how truly blinding this man's aura is. Something beyond her sight, she says. Well, as far as I'm aware, there's only one lighthouse in the game, and as we enter Gatian Port, our radar goes off. We're so close now. My heart's about to leap through my chest. We take the lift to the top of the lighthouse. and there are just no words, no explanation for what we're witness to. Even this old man can't bring himself to move an inch. Atop the lighthouse, we have the true finale of this game. A battle with none other than the Mirror B, with a chance of catching the final Shadow Pokemon. Alright, no holding back. We need to unleash our true strength. I figure there's no reason we can't try out our new legendaries. Only Pokemon befitting of the man himself. Once again, Mirror B uses a full team of Ludicolo, and once again making use of Rain. I lead with our brand new Articuno and Zapdos. Hopefully their levels level 57. Ludicolo uses a fake out on Articuno, getting a crit, flinching it, and Zapdos sets up a Shadow Sky, which is instantly nullified by Rain Dance. Mirror B seeing every possibility through his afro. Now both Ludicolo can outspeed with Swift Swim. One hitting a rain boosted Hydro Pump on Zapdos, putting it in the red, and the other hitting a rain boosted Hydro Pump, bringing Articuno low. We reset Shadow Sky, and Articuno uses Shadow Chill, doing just about half. Zapdos can outspeed once again, Shadow Bolt doing well over half, and Articuno uses a Shadow Chill to finish what it started. Another Ludicolo coming in to take his place. Ludicolo once again hits Hydro Pump, Articuno no longer being able to hold on. This man just took down a legendary bird. Seems a little bit stupid sending out Moltres, but while the Shadow Sky's up, we can outspeed. I target the healthy Ludicolo with Shadow Bolt, and Moltres' Shadow Fire can finish off the damaged one. Yet another Ludicolo. Waterfall puts Zapdos down. This man has killed 2 legendary birds. Next into the big Lugia, a box legendary. Shadow Storm picks up 1 kill and does a lot of chip to the other Ludicolo. And out comes the final one. Unfortunately, I did do something a little stupid as I doubled into the slot of the fainted one, meaning Shadow Fire does some damage to the incoming Ludicolo, but doesn't get the kill. The idea was that I could pick up a double KO with Shadow Storm, but then Ludicolo sets up a Rain Dance, meaning not only does Ludicolo outspeed, managing to hit the 5th Hydro Pump in a row, killing Moltres in 1 hit, killing his 3rd legendary bird, but now Shadow moves also do less. The second Ludicolo doubling in on the fainted Moltres with Thunder Punch, critting and then killing Swallow. Good lord, Mirror B. We went from being in a fantastic position to being down to our final 2 Pokemon. It's like his team was built to counter the legendary birds. As expected, Shadow Storm does less, but it wasn't even enough to kill the weakened Ludicolo. Ludicolo uses a super effective Ice Punch on Lugia, not doing too much, but the other hits the 6th rain boosted Hydro Pump in a row on poor Butterfree, half their level. This man has defeated 4 legendary birds. Lugia manages to pick up the kill and brings the other low. Alright, we're down to our last Pokemon, as Dragonite comes out, but that's fine. This is salvageable. Ludicolo hits another Ice Punch, us surviving. No! And that's all Shadow Storm does. We would have been fine. As it turns out, even the heavens favor Mirror B. Ludicolo uses a Thunder Punch this time, Lugia even defrosting to finish her off. But at this point, it's too late. With both of us on our final Shadow Pokemon, Dragonite uses a Shadow Storm, doing just enough to finish Lugia off. This man putting down 5 legendary birds. Not gonna lie, was not expecting that. Even my second attempt went horribly, with us losing while 3 of his mons were still alive. The third attempt went far better, with us having lost only Moltres and Zapdos, with Swallow even being able to use Shadow Half on Dragonite. And with no more Ludicolos threatening us with a bazooka made of water, we're safe to catch Dragonite in our own time. Butterfree puts him to sleep, and 5 Ultra Balls later, we have caught the final Shadow Pokemon, putting an end to the true final battle, and the end of this challenge. This time for real. Mirror B runs off into the sunset, the credits roll, and that's the end of the video. There was not a single part of me thinking that this would end up being my longest video when I first started this challenge. This game is way longer than Colosseum, but in my opinion, definitely holds up a lot better. The battles are more interesting, the level curve is a lot more forgiving, purifying Pokemon is actually fun to do now, and the game respects your time thanks to the Purify Chamber, and there's just so much quality of life in general. While I did complain about some of the Pokemon choices, if you actually play the game normally, you'll obviously be able to evolve your Pokemon, giving you some pretty interesting team combinations. And there's a lot more content outside of just catching and purifying the shadow Pokemon. To this day, I still very much recommend playing this game if you haven't, even if you weren't a big fan of Colosseum. This game fixes many of the issues I had at least. If you were able to make it this far, thank you so much for watching, and hey, maybe even like and subscribe, because I worked really hard on this and I like attention and stuff, and if you don't, you smell bad. I'm sad that there aren't any more GameCube games like these I can play. I would have loved to do a challenge like this in another game, but maybe I might think of playing a ROM hack next. The ROM hack for Gale of Darkness I remember being especially good, and I last played that like 4 years ago. Please let me know if you'd be interested in seeing a video like that, and maybe me even playing through those ROM hacks on a stream. And please look forward to more videos in the future.